Here.
Dr. Townsend,
Here.
Mrs. Cushman,
Here.
Mr. Hamre,
Here.
Mr. LeBlanc, Mrs. Pickett,
Here.
Mr. Ryder,
Here.
Mr. Ungarter,
Here.
Madam Chair.
Here. Okay, this evening we have invited guests with the town council members. Are we doing roll call for the town council members now, or are we doing it during their portion?
We'll do it during their portion.
Okay. Welcome to the town council members that are here. I know some of you went to the last school modernization committee meeting and got to see the presentation earlier, so I appreciate you all opening up your schedules to be here this evening. John LeBlanc, Cynthia Mangini, and Gina Sakala are going to be late, so I just wanted to update that. So I'd like to welcome the school modernization committee up to the microphone for their presentation and update. Just a little bit of information on the School Modernization Committee. It was formed and it contains all residents of Enfield, staff, or parents, and there are no voting, none of the elected officials are voting members of the committee. This is a community committee, and the recommendations come from them and the votes come from them. We do not have a voting voice on this committee. So, thank you.
All right. So thank you. The Pre-K through 5 School Modernization Committee was started back in March after one of these joint meetings. At the time, it was set out a very ambitious schedule for the scale of the project. We were trying to cram in many months of work into a kind of short period of time once we got past bidding and getting subcontractors for some of the work. So as you all know, we did not have a recommendation in time for November referendum. Unsurprisingly, the process took a little bit longer than was scheduled. We still do not have the final cost estimate that was part of the feasibility study. That process is still ongoing. However, based on site assessments and site recommendations, we have a proposal for your consideration tonight. As Tina mentioned, the building committee is a representative group containing parents, teachers, community members, Board of Education liaisons, Department of Public Works, Enfield administration. All of these committee members toured our pre-K through 5 school facilities. They consulted with our contracted design team at Russell and Dawson on school design. And this presentation includes their recommendations and feedback. And I'd like to thank all of the members of the committee for their work on that.
Excuse me, sorry, John. We're not seeing the presentation on the monitor that we're all facing. So I just wanted to. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Sorry.
Alex
Up there now?
watching.
I just didn't want anybody to think we were all turning our heads to the audience. Thank you.
Good. We couldn't have got to the recommendations tonight without their input. So just kind of a recap, some of the committee goals and priorities. They were charged with investigating consolidation of the K2 and 3-5 schools. The goal of that was to reduce transition and improve engagement in schools. That's for both engagement for both students and families in the schools. One of the key priorities was to avoid redistricting. It's a painful process. We'd like to avoid that if possible. Also, we'd like to avoid construction-related disruptions to learning. For our middle school and high school project, we did have construction ongoing while students were in the building, and we felt that that wasn't acceptable with students at the pre-K through 5 level. I know as a pre-K kids would love to see a cranes on site, but I don't know that it's appropriate to have them there with them. So the committee was looking and taking recommendations for identifying the potential consolidated school sites, reuse of the school facilities, and any economic implications of consolidation. So the scope of the feasibility study, we were looking at the existing conditions of the schools and their systems. So that includes things such as the site, the interior, exterior systems, plumbing and fire systems, mechanical, electrical systems. And they were all evaluated and ranked in priority for repair or replacement. There was estimates of capital expenditure for some of the major systems and that code compliance, ADA compliance. We are making suggestions for sites for school reuse, and we're making estimated costs of new or renovate to new for the consolidated schools was part of the project. Those costs are still ongoing. We have meetings with Russell and Dawson on Friday to fine-tune. So just to recap, we've had a couple different school projects that have gone on, Enfield High and JFK in the past. Renovate to new, just so everyone's aware what that means. It means the building is used and all systems are updated to guarantee a 20-year life. So generally the shell of the building, so that your foundations, walls, roof structure remains, and all other systems are replaced to guarantee the surface life. So they might take out the plumbing, they might redo the electrical, generally changing the HVAC system out. In that process, additional new space can be added to the existing structure. If you think of Enfield High, they added the steam wing off and took off what was D wing. In the case of our elementary schools, renovate to new would be things like adding wings, similar to happened in Enfield High, but would be restricted on adding additional floors to the building on the existing foundation. So we couldn't just build up on those existing schools. The steel and structure wasn't meant for adding additional floors. That was actually explored back in 2012 with the D wing at Enfield High. There was a proposal to add floors onto the D wing. The analysis came back pretty quickly. No, you can't do that. The similar thing would be here. So renovate to new has some advantages. Generally, you have a higher reimbursement rate from the state, right? You're getting 71.79% back. That's based on our 2024 rate. It can have a lower initial cost. That's project dependent, but in general, it can be lower. It reuses part of your existing building, and you can add new spaces, and it's potentially less time consuming. There are some significant disadvantages, though. The foundation and essential structure is still old. So if you're putting money into a 70-year-old building and you're expecting another 50 years of use out of it, you could have a 120-year-old exterior structure and foundation for your building. It's less flexible in your design, right? So you're constrained by some of that original building perimeter and the walls inside. There's space restrictions on site, one where you could place a new wing, and then you end up having a mix of kind of old and new spaces with that. Long term, you have generally higher energy costs because the original structure itself is considerably less efficient than probably your new wing, and you generally have some higher long-term maintenance costs. So it's cheaper up front, can be more expensive in the future. New constructions. In new construction, you have some greater flexibility. You're designing with all of your major systems, including modern classroom needs, arrangements, and future uses. It's generally improved safety. The reason for that is you're changing things and you're changing the height of windows, door locations, visitor visibility, parent access, etc. All that's part of the new building design. Generally, you have kind of less unplanned maintenance. All systems designed with the structure and the entire building envelope is new, so there's no need to repoint brick or make major changes to the roof. Generally, there's also significantly improved efficiency. In a renovate to new scenario, you're limited to the shape of the wall, structure of the existing building, and that existing structure limits your ability to add an extra insulation. You can't pull the brick off cheaply and easily to add more insulation. A new building, you can design it multi-floor, incorporate a greater level of insulation, have reduced glazed surface area, so fewer windows, and likely have a more efficient HVAC because it's laid out as the building is planned. And there's also options for moving to what's called a net zero building, where you're generating as much energy as you're consuming. I think Manchester has been doing a large project like that with their schools, where they've added solar and efficiency upgrades so that they're not paying, or over the course of the year, they're not paying utility bills on the building. So the disadvantage is greater upfront cost. Although you can sometimes get a higher dollar reimbursement, the town gets more actual money back because the project's more expensive, you're paying more upfront. If you're adding things that greatly increase the efficiency of your building, if you're adding renewable energy, your long-term costs may be lower. The schools are paying over $500,000 a year now for just utility costs for the 7 elementary buildings. So that is an investment that could be paying dividends for a long period of time. When we originally started, there were a couple systems that were excluded from the feasibility study, and those were changes needed for school security, upgrades to HVAC, including air conditioning, and requirement for program spaces. When we were trying, or our original August deadline for the feasibility study, there really isn't enough time to engineer all of those systems into building, and then you'd be engineering those systems and their costs for buildings that you could potentially not be reusing. So those weren't included. And some of those, I just have those required program spaces, could be things like special program rooms, student support personnel offices, or future community use. So in Russell and Dawson's, some of the key findings, once all of these are out of draft form, we'll be posting them on the school modernization website. They had some general recommendations, including replacing, or I should back up for a second. The Department of Public Works had a document that was their 10-year capital projection, which was created about 2 years ago and updated this March, which projected how much they were anticipating the schools needed in capital improvements. And their estimate was around $36.2 million for that. And that was what the number we shared in the March meeting. The recommendations from Russell and Dawson nearly mirrored those. There was a few additional things that weren't in there, but it was remarkably close. They did recommend changing all of the unit ventilators in the school. So if you walk up to the building and you look on the front, you see little vents below the windows. And in the classrooms, they have their heaters/ventilators in there. And they did mention a good deal of ADA compliance issues, bathroom access, things like handrails, wall protrusions, things like water fountains or things sticking out into the hallway, which could be an issue. And there was other things such as stage access and others that were ADA compliance issues. And then in addition, parking area improvements, marking and lighting. And some of that also went to ADA. One of the more interesting things in here is a quote that was in one of the feasibility study drafts. And you can read it. I'm not going to read it to you, but basically it was saying, and I don't know if you have read a lot of architectural documents, but they generally get paid on the scope of the project. It could be a percentage of the project. If they're recommending or they're saying that a scope should be is significant and expensive and needs to be carefully determined, they're really saying don't use this site, right? With a building like Memorial, where you have 70%, your walls are about 70% windows, it's very expensive to take and reduce window area and replace those. It's going to add to a lot of long-term energy costs and might not be practical. So for all of our buildings, they gave a facility conditions analysis ranking. They ranked everything in the buildings by urgent, high, moderate, or low priority. Your urgents are things you should take care of right away. High priority, 1 to 3 years. Moderate priority, 3 to 5. And then low priority is 10 years or greater. Looking at these buildings, they're totaling about $42,600,000 for the buildings. For urgent, there was about $3.19 million in that category, and a lot of that had to do with roofing. So both Enfield Street School and Stowe, as part of that rooferendum, are still slated to have their roofs repaired, and Barnard still had a portion that needed to be completed as well. So those urgent priority equaled about 3.19. The high priority, though, right, things that you should be looking at came to about 18.7 million in today's dollars. So you can see there's a significant need there. But there's two buildings, I highlighted their totals in red, that's Crandall and Memorial, right? So looking at that, it's nearly $17 million for just those two buildings alone. Also, I'd like to point out that when the Department of Public Works did their projections just 2 years ago, they were saying around 36.2 million. And now with similar recommendations coming in, that's already gone up to 42.6 million. We know that there's been inflation, there's been increases in construction costs and labor, but I don't think that that's a trend that's going to maybe continue at the same rate, but I don't think that things are going to get cheaper the longer we wait. Now, this total number also doesn't include HVAC, and we'll talk about some of the recommendations a little bit further on. Our program needs and school security, and also doesn't include inflation, finance costs, and unknowns that come up whenever you start a project. it's not hard to believe, and I'll kind of explain this in a little bit more detail in a minute, that this total could eventually reach $100 million over the course. So how could we get there? So if we were to take and keep our 7 current buildings while addressing the identified needs, I'm saying it could cost up to $100 million over the next few years, and not all of the work would necessarily be reimbursable from the state. A piecemeal approach wouldn't really be advisable either, taking these on project by project, since addressing the systems and needs independently would almost certainly give you a poorer performance than a fully engineered system that would either be in a renovate to new or new building. So how do we get from 42 million to 100? HVAC, which is more than just air conditioning. That's your ventilation and air conditioning, but air conditioning can't go in without significant upgraded electrical work. Repairs to disturbed drywall, ceilings, roofing as part of installing that, and plumbing that's required for it. We got to around 6 million by taking a look at the estimates for what a renovate to new building would be, and the amount for just the HVAC equipment and systems themselves, not including electrical, plumbing, and those other finished surfaces, is around $6 million. So when you think about expanding those other systems, that's how we get there. School security is another area that's particularly expensive to address. School security often requires things like special doors, windows, man traps, relocation of offices so that there's visibility of people coming in. Just when we did Eagle Academy in 2019, I think we had a $32,000 door for just the center of the building for 2 glass panels and a crash bar door because it met the school security standards. Adding things like special program rooms and the specialized equipment they required can be extremely expensive. Bathrooms were recently added to Stowe. When you have to break up the concrete floor to put in plumbing or electrical, for that can add considerably to the cost of making renovations to the building. So air conditioning might seem excessive. We haven't had air conditioning in these buildings, but we also, as part of the study, had an indoor air quality survey. I know this is going to be very hard to read. We're going to put the whole presentation up on the Pre-K through 5 School Modernization Committee website, and you'll eventually get a final written report for this. But when they were working on indoor air quality, the Russell and Dawson subcontracted to Enviromed, who did site assessments to measure indoor air quality. What they were looking for was temperature, relative humidity, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, dust, particularly respirable dust that you can breathe in, volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, formaldehyde, which is a chemical that's used in a lot of building materials. It's usually an adhesive, and mold in the air. And then they gave us overall assessments for the buildings. So looking at this, in the summertime for temperature, they're looking at indoor air temperatures to range between 72 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So some of our buildings, Barnard was within that range, and Stowe was within that range. Others exceeded that range during the sample time. In all of our buildings, they exceeded that 20 to 60% relative humidity, and Memorial at one point had 90.5. That 20 to 60% is there as a window through which it's unlikely for mold to grow. Once you exceed that, there is potential for mold to start growing within the building. Carbon monoxide was low in all the buildings. We have systems that detect it, and our heating equipment is functioning appropriately, so that's not something we'd expect. Something that was completely unexpected was carbon dioxide. So it's important to understand that there's 2 standards for carbon dioxide. One is the American Society for Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers. They put a standard out that says 707 parts per million. The other is the OSHA standard, which is 5,000. So OSHA would apply for adults, doesn't typically apply for students, and that ASHRAE standard is essentially a recommendation, but new systems, when you're designing them, that's a target to keep your CO2 under that level. So we had some buildings that did have reduced capacity, so were not full, but did have summer programming. So Barnard, Crandall, and Stowe all had students in the building and were all above standard for carbon dioxide. So that just kind of validates the argument that we need increased ventilation within the buildings. The custodial crews should be pleased. They're doing fine work according to the respirable dust. All of those were low. So there was 5 milligrams per meter cubed, and all of those were low. VOCs were also low in the buildings, except for Whitney. They happened to be indoor air sampling in an area where they were waxing the floor, so that's to be expected, that the VOCs would be high. Formaldehyde was low, and that has to do with the age of the buildings. They are made with tile walls and wouldn't have used a lot of the materials that would still be off-gassing at this point. So formaldehyde was low. Mold, you'll notice that there is no standard listed, and there are no standards for indoor mold. What they do is they take a relative measure of indoor air samples to outdoor. So they put a tester outside, and they compare the levels outside to inside. 2 of our buildings did have a amplification. Barnard had essentially a non-toxigenic mold. That's a mold that can potentially be an allergen, but is not known to infect people. They took a sample, and you'll see it in the final report. They took a sample next to a rug that had been cleaned and rolled up. I don't know if you've seen the entry rugs at most of the schools, but it's probably any rug that had been near an entry for that long, you could probably find mold on that. Memorial, there was, when they tested, on the days they tested, evidence of mold on the surface of windowsills. It wasn't in the air, but it was surface. They had that in 3 classrooms. However, prior to us even getting the report with that, they had been cleaned. So after they sent in a crew to double check, they were unable to find it in the 3 rooms identified in the report. All of the buildings remain fit for occupancy. Students can use them. There was no additional constraints, but they did recommend a few things. They did recommend upgrading mechanical ventilation in all the buildings. The buildings were designed in a time where there was just not really established standards, and the standards for amount of fresh air in buildings has increased over the years. And the other one was to control humidity. To control humidity would prevent mold from growing, and it would make the environment much more comfortable. The only effective way to control humidity is to have air conditioning, but also within the scope of a building that's been designed to have air conditioning, which usually means fewer operable windows, if any. The next part of their assessments was a demography report, and there was a couple different scenarios that they explored. They explored births looking at a 5-year moving average, at births at using a housing market projection. They did this with 2 groups. They did it with assuming a 90% kindergarten enrollment and a 92% kindergarten enrollment. The difference between those 2 is so that if we had increased enrollment due to new or substantially renovated schools, we'd have a scenario that would predict how many additional students we could expect. The variation between those findings was less than 100 between the 4, and we're fairly confident in the projection they gave of 2,491 students pre-K through 5 in 2031, 2032, and I'll explain why that year next slide. That puts us at about 2,252 K-5, or roughly equivalent to what our student enrollment was in the 2017-2018 school year. So not unreasonable that new or substantially renovated schools, and with additional housing that's planned for the town of Enfield, that we could see enrollment get back to the enrollment from roughly 5 years ago. So during COVID, there was a boost in birth rate. There were more people who had babies in that 2021 year. It was a little bit higher than the preceding years. So that means that at some point, probably around the 26-27, we'll be experiencing an increase in our kindergarten enrollment that will carry through. And then with additional planned housing and the potential for additional enrollment or students not choosing to go to magnet schools, they're predicting by 2031, 2032, we'd have kind of our peak enrollment. Just looking raw numbers, we can use the state report. It's an SCG 2500 to kind of predict. They say roughly 25 students per classroom. If you look at it as a whole, the total is only 96 classrooms. Now, not all students will be in a regular ed classroom. We still have DLP, ALP, ECP. We have other classrooms for students, but they're saying 96 in total. That's significantly lower than the number of classrooms we have now. If you actually look at it across 3 buildings, 3 projects, the numbers work out a little bit better. When you run the table, it works out to approximately 102 classrooms, which is 8 lower than we had last year. So that means that at some point the committee will need to, and it's probably at the next phase, the pre-referendum committee phase, to decide if they want to adjust plans to account for additional classrooms in there. One of the last pieces that we got were site recommendations from Russell and Dawson. The state has some requirements for what a school site should be. The preliminary recommendations were based mostly on acreage, because that gives you, roughly the state's looking for 10 acres for a school and 1 acre for each 100 students within the school. So in that, Stowe has 28 acres, Whitney and the library is a 15.91 acre parcel, and Barnard is 19.62. So those are kind of in our 3 zones within town. So Barnard's up in the north. They have approximately, we'd be looking at a school of around 825 students, and they have approximately 734 students right now. With growth, it's not hard to see how it gets there. 659 students now, so you can see that could also get up closer to that number. The southern zone, where the Stowe site, that currently only has 551 students, so a little bit smaller capacity school would probably be needed in that zone. So maybe a school around 750. And they're working on options for new or renovate to new. Based on the committee's feedback during some of our summer meetings, we gave them a list of program spaces that we would like and the number of classrooms that we would like to see within the buildings. And currently, this is something we still need to work with Russell and Dawson on. We're about 11,000 square feet over what would be reimbursable, or what would reach maximum reimbursement. So we have some continued work for that. So let's look at some of these sites. As part of the project, Russell and Dawson gave us a rough floor plan of what a building could look like if we were designing as new. So the rough building was 3 floors, and it was approximately the size of the first floor of Stowe. So if you can picture that building, and you can imagine putting additional levels up top, that's where we have. So on their site, I just put a kind of blue rectangle on there, roughly the dimensions of the school that was shown. So that's that picture that you're seeing on the left. On the right is a image from CT Echo. That's a GIS database, and what you're seeing in purple is actually the lands that identified as wetlands on that site. I grew up near that site. Yep, it's all of that purple is really wet. It's pretty much marsh back there. So you can see there's a narrow strip of gray there, and then where the main building is now. So if you're looking at this as a site, their recommended school size originally was probably not the right size, and there were some issues. They've refined that since, but there's some issues with wetlands reclamation on the site. If we were trying to expand out or replace the building, we would have issues. If we were trying to do it with the students there, essentially have a building project around the back, you could see that that would cause significant impact to programming. I can't really imagine trying to operate the preschool. And if you've seen the amount of traffic at that school in the morning and afternoon with construction vehicles coming in and them requiring staging area for materials and so on. So there's a couple issues with that site. right? We have some wetlands issues. We have significant wetland issues. Impacts on programming during construction, and the school size doesn't really match the enrollment. All right, so that might require redistricting. Eli Whitney was the second site. Eli Whitney is a little interesting because the library is currently on part of the parcel that is on Eli Whitney's site plan. Again, just using that rough estimate of what a building would look like, I put our blue rectangle on there, just on the site where it would not impact the school itself or the library too much, but that would destroy 2 softball fields. And then also, if you look at that image over on the right, you can see that the only area of wetlands on the parcel is the area that is where the softball field's now. And if you've ever seen the town tractor sink into the turf around the softball field, you know that that area is also fairly wet. So that could impact the library and the school using that site. It might require a variance or a waiver from the Office of School Construction to leave the library on the site, or we'd have to relocate it, which isn't anything that was in the scope of what our recommendations were. Also, in this case, the recommendation for the school size doesn't really match the zone population. Here, they were recommending a little bit smaller school. We would need to adjust that or end up redistricting. Similarly, Henry Barnard has some restrictions as well. If we put the building, or if we were trying to build a new building, or even substantially renovate and expand the building, you could imagine that we would need to expand out to the back or possibly in the front of the building near the U-shaped driveway. Barnard has an additional constraint, is there's purple now and there's light purple on the wetlands map from CT Echo. That light purple is an escarpment, so a lower area and wetlands, or the building would impact the sports fields. Additionally, Barnard has some constraints with site access. If we were trying to build behind the building, there's playgrounds on the left side, there's playgrounds and a large transformer on the right of the building. So that would also cause significant disruptions if we were trying to continue operation at the school while it was under construction or a new building was being built on site. So I grew up in Enfield. Wetlands are going to be an issue pretty much with any site that we could acquire at this point. We knew wetlands were going to be an issue with all of our school sites before we began the building process. The recommendations within the scope of the proposal didn't really leave us with a viable swing space either. A swing space would be a school that we could use transitionally while the schools are being worked on. There's potential to build new on site, but again, that didn't really meet the committee goal. So with these challenges, getting these draft recommendations, we took a step back and started looking for some alternatives. What could we do instead? And we're just trying to reduce the impact of this. So another thing to consider in school construction, site acquisition is not reimbursable, right? So if the town would bear the full cost of purchasing land for a new school, if we needed to build new on a new site to get that swing space. So considering that, we began looking at some alternative options. Early in the year with the discussions with the town, we became aware that the town did own several parcels of land across town. One of them is town-owned land near Mark Twain, which is between Mark Twain and the industrial park. There's a 99-acre site. So again, if you think of, where Veterans Memorial Park is, there is a plot there. They own a plot to the left and one to the north. One advantage of this site is its location, the size. There are some issues with this as well. It does have existing sports fields on it, and it does have wetlands that might need to be reclaimed. Additionally, there is a zoning issue as well, right? But currently, that land is zoned as part of the industrial park. But zoning and wetlands, as you've seen, are going to be issues with any of our sites. If you think about where Stowe is, where Barnard is, there were never I don't know that they're currently zoned for buildings as tall as we might need to build on the site to get the additional space for consolidated schools, and all of them have wetlands on site. So there are some advantages of, and some challenges to exploring a new site. One advantage of exploring a new site is that it's town-owned, so there would be no additional cost for site acquisition. As you can see on the map, it is close to Whitney for building a potential new school. And if we were to potentially build a new school on that site, that would give us an option for a swing school. So basically, construction could start, the building could be built, finished, and then we could begin transitions with students. So we would never have to have students in school while their school is being renovated. The challenges, which again, were with all of our sites, is there's going to be some wetlands reclamation required for that, and there would potentially need to be zoning changes for that site. Taking that into account, and if we explore the option of using this new site, we put together a proposal that included phasing for this, and we will make this available on the Enfield Public Schools website after the meeting so the public can see it larger. And we'll also have some this presentation on there as well. We'll make that available after the meeting tonight. I believe that most members should have received this in hard copy. I'm going to just break it out by section for the viewing public. So phase one of the project would be building a new school near Mark Twain. All right, so the land adjacent there. When that school was completed, we would have Whitney and Memorial move to the new school. At that point, we could close Memorial. And closing Memorial kind of gives the town an opportunity to potentially reuse that site as open space. It already has existing sports fields on there. Based on our assessments, we don't think that that building is one that could be recommended for reuse for another due to its existing conditions. Also, once that new school opens, we could move Parkman to Whitney, making Whitney our swing school. So that students from Parkman could move to Whitney. And then at Parkman, we could renovate Parkman that summer and move Stowe Early Learning Center and ECDC to Parkman. The Parkman site already has the splash pad on site. It has more classrooms there. It would be an excellent location for our preschool programs. That would allow us to start phase two, which would be our southern zone. So in that southern zone, we could build a new school at the Stowe Early Learning Center. That site, if the building was uninhabited, that main portion of the building or main building, the wetlands had already been reclaimed for that original building, so there would be less work needed there. Students, once that building is complete, Enfield Street students and Parkman Zone students would move to the new school in our southern zone. At that point, we'd move Barnard to Whitney, and because they would free up Barnard for phase three. Enfield Street School at that point could move to Eagle Academy. Yes, it could be renovated for Eagle Academy. Eagle Academy could be renovated for alternative ed. And then following those renovations, we could move Eagle Academy to Enfield Street School and move alternative ed to Eagle Academy. That would allow for program expansion for both of those. So our Eagle Academy program and alternative ed. The final phase would be a new school or renovate to new school at Barnard. When that's done, we'd move the Barnard Zone students in Crandall to the new school, close Crandall, renovate Whitney, and then move ECDC to Whitney. So it's kind of a lot. There's a document, it'll be up on the website tonight, and I'll go through kind of our final, current versus final site use now. So Barnard would be the new northern school. I put that in quotes. I'll leave that to someone else to name. I don't want anyone to think we're naming schools after correctional institutes. Leave that to you. Crandall, it's could be sold. It could be a possible subdivision. The town could decide they want to keep it as open space There would be a future committee or future town action to decide the reuse of that site. Eagle Academy, the current Eagle Academy site could now become alternative ed. That's a kind of a unique option, right? So by moving that, our alternative ed would be close to our high school. Now at Eagle Academy now, we have staff who are traveling from Enfield High to Eagle Academy to offer classes. So we offer graphic arts, art, physical ed. Right? It's easy for people to move over because they're essentially on the same campus. They share a driveway. So that could expand program options there. Memorial, we'd recommend as open space. It would be very difficult to reuse the building for something else. But again, that's a recommendation. Town council would ultimately have say on that. Parkman would house the programs for the Stowe Early Learning Center. In the event that universal pre-K did come to fruition, that would be approximately the size of the site, Parkman, that you would need for pre-K programs. So this current Stowe site would become our new Southern School. Again, feel free to pick a better name than that. And Whitney could become essentially the location for ECDC. We would be at that point splitting the two programs. This creates a couple of unique opportunities. The program expansion for the Eagle Academy, Stowe at Parkman, and alternative ed would be a huge benefit for our students and the town. So currently, Eagle Academy, when we opened it in 2019, we needed about 6 to 8 students to make that break even. The maximum was supposed to be 25 or 26 students. I think we're at 27 students at Eagle Academy. There's demand internally, and any student we can serve here, we not only benefit the student by not transporting them off to another site, we also save significantly by not having to pay the therapeutic day school tuition rates at other facilities. Stowe Early Learning Center at Parkman, we're regularly turning away families that would like to have pre-K for their students. Some of them are income ineligible, right, but there are limited slots with the current arrangement for pre-K. So that would offer options to expand fee-based preschool to Enfield residents or as a regional model. Or if universal pre-K was ever to become a mandate, we would already have the space allocated to accommodate all of Enfield pre-K students. Alternative ed is a great one. We could offer special services there. And so we could that would also make it a viable option for towns who are looking to send students to our alternative ed program, essentially allowing regionalization on a tuition basis for that program as well. So by expanding Eagle at Stowe and alternative ed, that could essentially be cost savings or revenue generating for all of those. ECDC similarly has demand for additional slots, especially infant and toddler. They could use additional rooms now with a site like Whitney, near the library, near a accessible playground, on a central route where people traveling in from Summers or Stafford or other towns could use daycare services or childcare services while going to work. That becomes another option where we could be offering regional childcare services there. Reduce busing. The plan would reduce busing time for sure, because we're not stopping off at one school to offload K-3-5 and then going to our K2 schools, but also is potential if the current some of the students housed for our school age program are housed at the school, we could potentially eliminate that run as well. So we could also expand recreational access as well. So if the Hazardville Memorial site becomes additional fields or additional basketball courts or others, that could, if the new central school has additional fields or work done on that site while the school is there, we could expand recreation on that as well. A big one is the reduced capital investment at the two buildings with the highest need. So Crandall and Memorial, again, it's almost 17 million today's dollars before addressing any of the other needs there. And we would eliminate or reduce unnecessary capital investment at Stowe. If it's going to be the site of a newer school, we wouldn't necessarily have to put the funding into a roof for that. We might be able to get by. In this phasing, this would happen over a number of years. There couldn't be no capital investment in the buildings. We would still need to do things to maintain them, but it could reduce it. So with reduced busing time, with our consolidated schools, we essentially would be making it more convenient for parents, and we could be increasing the number of opportunities for regionalization for our programs. So what's the main challenges with this? It was outside the scope of the original feasibility study. We would need additional time to investigate the alternative site, that lot of land. That could be something that could happen during another phase. All of our sites, as identified, have wetland and potential zoning issues, so we really do need an additional study. And one of the other things is there is a limited time to how long we can consider this because there are pending projects. I mentioned that referendum. We mentioned the high need for some of our schools. Stowe is due for a roof. And there's that capital investment plan. We need to know relatively quickly what we're doing to avoid spending money unnecessarily on these buildings. If we get this right, though, it does offer an opportunity for systemic change. We could be changing not just education, but also childcare, recreation, municipal funding for this community for generations. And we could allow Enfield to become a regional hub for all of those. So the committee's recommendation is adoption of the site selection and phasing for future study. You're not 100% committed to that, but we're suggesting further study. That can be done in the pre-referendum phase, similar to like happened for Enfield High. There was a recommendation after feasibility studies from SLAM that was further refined, and I believe that the site selection was ultimately chosen during the pre-referendum phase. So we'd ask for additional funding for a design team for pre-referendum work, and something that wasn't brought up at the original presentation. Since we originally proposed this to the Pre-K School Modernization Committee, there has been an opportunity for an additional indoor air quality grant from the state of Connecticut, which could allow for the installation of air conditioning and ventilation equipment at school sites that we are potentially reusing. So that could be Enfield Street, Parkman, and Whitney. So if we're looking at those sites with the potential to get our higher reimbursement rate of 71.79% for that work, there could be an opportunity to leverage this to get needed upgraded repairs for school facilities that we could still plan on continuing using in the future. They're not guaranteed for all sites because their long-term use may change, but we think it's worth investigating, applying for those grants and potentially saving many millions of dollars on cost for the town as a future. So you might hear a little bit more about that. There's a kind of a significant process, and you might hear from me a couple more times before December if you decide to move forward with that. There's some steps, including authorizing the superintendent to apply. Town would need to adopt a long-term strategic plan, which we have a draft for, allocate funding for the design of it, and form a building committee for those projects. But those are the committee's recommendations. Are there any questions?
Anybody? Counselor Finger?
I was really sure we meant just the Board of Education for questions, but
No, it's for all of us to have a discussion here. So whatever questions, comments, or concerns you have.
thank you, Chairwoman. Appreciate it. So just a couple of questions. One would be the behind Mark Twain and the wetlands.
Mm-hmm.
We've turned down businesses there, Eppendorf and Winstanley, to put additional buildings there because of the wetlands policies. How are we going to get around that with putting a school there if it's almost the same area? It's pretty darn close. So, I mean, how are we going to get by all that to be able to get approved for that wetlands when other organizations, like it would have saved 113 North Maple, it would have saved the lakes from being having a big building put between the two lakes if we allowed them to put something in the wetlands. So is there something that's in, I mean, first of all, let me just say this much. This was an excellent presentation. I think you did an excellent job. I'm really behind this, but I just want to make sure that the taxpayers, the tax dollars are spent something that we're not going to be, we're saying a certain amount, we have a certain amount to redo, like the wetlands and additional costs for HVAC and things like that. This isn't just, out of the pocket expense. This is a major expense. Again, I'm behind it 100%. There's no doubt about it. We need it in this town. We did the high school, we did JFK, nothing wrong with doing a grammar school. I love it. It's just the location that I have a problem with, of the wetlands behind Mark Twain. So do we have a plan for that?
So if the town council was to authorize a pre-referendum building committee, in that phase, there would need to be additional site assessments that would evaluate. Typically, I think it's a form SCG 03. They're basically taking in, they hire a environmental engineering company to do site assessments. As part of that work, they would need to say whether that site is suitable for building or not. And there could be work to estimate costs for remediation, and they can be
Right.
considerable. All of our sites have wetlands on them, so that
Yeah.
has to be done for all of them. And we have to complete that form. The acceptance of the site doesn't 100% bind you to use that site if it comes back that it's unusable.
Okay.
Right? Originally, if you remember, for the Enfield High project, we were deciding between Enfield High and Fermi.
Right.
Site assessment for Fermi showed soil contamination with a high remediation cost, which helped tip it towards Enfield High's favor. In this case, I think it's worth investigating the site, getting it, because of the benefits we have from having a plan for a swing school, potential for a new school in excellent location. Communication around reuse of the site and not allowing business to use it versus having schools use it. I think there's an argument to say that the school is something that does benefit the broader community, not that businesses don't, but it's a different use case for it. And we may be using a significantly smaller portion of that site than a facility the size of what was built over by Winstanley with Eppendorf. We might be using a significantly smaller portion of it, which may significantly reduce the impact on those wetlands.
Great. Again, just got one more, if you don't mind, please.
Of course, yeah.
So the cost of building the school, you said, was around,
We don't have a rough
I mean, you
estimate.
said it was almost an estimated cost.
I think we only mentioned estimated repair costs.
Oh, for the other one, okay, yeah.
So if we were
something-
taking, if we do nothing, if we have 7 sites
Right,
that we need to do the work to bring them up to modern standards, so we know of $42.6 million of work that needs to be done right now before we get into HVAC, before we get into.
that was going to be my next question, is anything for the HVAC and everything else?
So that could, if you add all of that up,
IT.
school security, IT, all that, you could be up to 100 million for just
100 million.
fixing the 7 school buildings that we have now.
Right, and I've been in a lot of these schools, and I spent, quite a few years as the, inside the school system, as a crew leader for buildings and grounds. I walked through Housing World, you can push the window almost into the back parking lot.
So that
It's
way-
bad, dude, it's
yeah,
bad.
it's bad.
That's why I agree with it. I just want to make sure that transparently that we let the taxpayers know what this is going to cost. I mean, I guess you don't have everything, but we have to make sure that everything is out and everybody understands that this is really a good thing, but what's the final,
I think one of the important
is gonna
things
be.
to consider with this is we're doing it responsibly in that we have a feasibility study. We know that that portion isn't reimbursable, right? But we have honed it down to 3 potential sites to then invest in that more significant scope. We didn't engineer HVAC. We didn't do all of the soil sampling. And for sites that we aren't using, we tried to do it responsibly. So in that pre-referendum phase is where we need to do that deeper digging, and there's greater opportunity for public engagement. That's when we can have the meetings where we bring all of the stakeholders in, community members, businesses, impacted the regions around it, sports teams, the little leagues, the softball that may be relocated while a school project's ongoing. That pre-referendum phase offers a lot of opportunities for communication, and typically that's done with the design team who's working on the building. They're providing plans, they're providing updates. So at this phase, you're not 100% tied to it. right? If the site assessment comes back and it's $20 million to remediate that or to reclaim that portion of wetlands, you've only lost the small investment on that one site. You still have two others that is
Excuse me.
right, that can be for the study. So then you're just looking for a new site or an alternative then.
So none of these stars are really the ones that we're looking for. This is just an option for the three areas that you're talking about.
It's an option. It's our suggestion to adopt that for further study. Right, but are you 100% committing to those three sites tonight?
You can't.
Can't.
You
You're
can't,
not.
right. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. And again, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm good. Thank you.
Ms. Pickett?
Doug, I just want to clarify, the 100 million projection is not for these three new buildings. That's for
That's
just
correct.
repairing our schools. And
Yeah.
that would be on taxpayer dollar. That would be a capital improvement project. That wouldn't be zero reimbursement from the state to
There's
do
potential
those.
for some things to be reimbursed. So we get reimbursement for roofs, right? But as you're doing these piecemeal projects, you have to consider a full project where you're doing them all at once is more cost effective than doing them piece by piece. So even if you're getting some reimbursement rate for certain projects, you're not going to get reimbursement for all of them. But if you're getting some, its cost is generally higher than doing it all at once.
Perfect. No worries, just wanted to make sure that was clear. I'm going to make a couple comments if you don't mind. So once I want to appreciate the effort and process for thanking the members of the committee, our staff, you, John Digg, and others who helped out, and the town staff for their work. I really appreciate this community committee and that approach of having it be a nonpartisan and folks who are really impacted by the project being part of the early planning of it. I hope to see expanded opportunities for inclusion of voices and perspectives in the next phases of the work. I do continue to be concerned about the impact on Thompsonville families. We have removed all K-8 buildings from them from previous decisions of what this board has done in the past. So I really want to ensure that we're intentional about our partnership with families and how we ensure our schools are community destinations that are accessible to families and inclusive to everybody. I do look to my fellow town council members and future elected members to ensure that there is a holistic approach for school buildings and town property, how we will repurpose the vacated buildings, and how we will sustain the new ones. This is a long-term investment, so we need to plan it as such. To my fellow Board of Ed members and future Board of Ed members, supporting a more student and family-centered model of elementary education just makes sense. I don't know how you want to get behind something like this. We need to ensure that this construction effort meets and what supports does the district need to ensure a smooth transition. I appreciate that the plan took into account minimizing disruptions to students, but there will still be change. How can we assist with the resources to ensure that there is a robust system of supports for our students and resources and capacity building for our staff? New buildings are great. However, we also need to ensure that we're supporting the systems and structures inside the buildings that also need to be reshaped. So I'm excited for this. I totally support this plan. I thank the committee again. I'm sad that I don't think my kids are going to benefit. I was doing the years out. Tessa's going to be a 5th grader in 2028. So I think
Most of our classrooms right now are 820 to 840. If that classroom space works for that additional 80 square feet times 100 rooms is square footage you get to take back. And if you decide to reallocate towards additional classrooms, you can get to an increased number. Okay. Similarly, clever ways to reduce space for like cafeterias and others can also claw back. And there's one other thing to look at. A lot of architects, they get what's called circulation factor. That's the amount of hallway space that's within a building. Sometimes the architect's initial designs have lots and lots of circulation space. If you remember, the original Enfield High was originally like a mall, right, with like open between the 3 floors of the steam wing, which ended up adding more square footage of circulation space. I first off couldn't imagine open 3 floors in a high school. So much stuff would have been thrown over. They did that for interior lighting, right? That was, I perfectly understand you can have natural light coming in through a skylight into interior areas, but the final design had a little bit narrower hallway, less circulation space, which allowed for more program space. So that is a longer conversation with the eventual like design team. And in all projects, we've gotten that down. We've had some unfunded space, but not as much as this phase is showing now.
Perfect. Sorry, just 2 more questions related to your portion of the presentation. You had mentioned the size of the schools. Will those vary by zone? Because I like that this plan doesn't involve redistricting. But if they vary by zone, do they match kind of those housing potential projections? So if we do reuse Crandall space, or we do put some different housing in Thompsonville, are those part of the
So
projections?
what we have is right now, and this would change, and this changed again with Enfield High Fermi project, is northern zone around 800 to 825, the central zone around 800, 825, and our southern probably around 725 to 750. What we have to remember is that we don't have a districting problem, we have a program location problem. So Barnard offers a lot of our, DLP classes, which we don't want to be in the business of transporting students to a school that has that many special programs in one. We'd like them to be having those classrooms in a new building as close to their home as possible, so that parents don't have a situation where they're taking kids. So by doing that and strategically placing our choice students, I don't think that we would need to redistrict if our southern school had approximately 3 to 4 less classrooms.
Perfect. And then my last one is about the HVAC grant, which I also think seems like a no-brainer. Do we have any idea the likelihood of getting this and how long this project would take? So would it have a more immediate impact, like HVAC in those buildings that don't have it and don't have any plan to get it?
So deadline is December 30th for this year. The grant award would be within the next few months for project work that could start in 2024 and would need to be done by the end of 2025. So that would be the time period. So before any new building was really even started being built, those 3 sites could already have improvements in HVAC. That would need to come as 3 separate projects. The eventual reuse of the building may impact its score on the scoring rubric, but there is potential for reimbursement. It's worth exploring.
Mr. Ryder?
So, Mr. Degg, is this a good point where we could bring up some of
Absolutely.
our parent volunteers from the School Modernization Committee? There's a few people that wanted to speak.
Absolutely.
I just didn't want everybody to ask questions that may also be answered.
If there's additional questions.
Yes. So our first speaker, if they want to come up now, I didn't get the order. Kurt?
Good evening. My name is Kurt Strorny. I'm a proud member of the Pre-K School Modernization Committee. I'm here tonight to present the many benefits to the town that the final phase of the Enfield School Modernization has the potential to create. We are very excited about all the prospective benefits to our town, beyond the most important benefit, which is to our children's education and well-being. First, I'd like to get out of the way the discussion of the prospect of closing 2 more schools in town. I, for one, would hate to see another vacant school building with its overgrown grass and crumbling structures. As a committee, we don't think the town wants to see that either. Preventing more empty buildings from occupying our landscape has been and will continue to be a concern of this committee. We feel that the reutilization of our buildings is an integral part of our plan. By shuffling around what each building is used for currently, we can regionalize our town's pre-K programs and Eagle Academy. We can accomplish all our goals, and we can close down only 2 schools. But since our plan does suggest closing Hazardville and Prudence Crandall, what can the town do to these properties? Well, closing Crandall creates opportunities. For example, a housing development could potentially be built in its place. New housing would bring more families to the town, along with increased tax revenue. The general layout of the land is very similar to such developments in neighboring towns. Or, second option, could be a Mark Twain-style housing development. It's no secret that our elderly need more affordable housing options. As it is, there's a waiting list to get into Mark Twain and other local elderly affordable housing. Maybe one of the sites could be renovated for that purpose. The closing of Hazardville Memorial also creates the potential for more recreational space, as John discussed. Our current parks in town are in constant use as they are. Let's create more space for our residents to enjoy activities such as pickleball, basketball, tennis, you name it. Let's get outside. You may ask, why have they decided to build and renovate in the order that they have? Well, this project differs from JFK and Enfield High, specifically because of the age of the children, like John discussed as well. Anyone who had children in JFK or Enfield High during the projects knows that it could be distracting, to say the least. While most middle school and high school kids could manage such distractions, we don't want to expose our younger students to the same thing. Our plan starts with building of the new central school, again, name to be determined, which would be located away from any other current school in the district. Eliminating the distractions and confusion of construction sites to our students. Once the central school is completed, students from Eli Whitney and Hazardville will attend the new central school and open Whitney to be the swing school for any building that's currently being renovated. Plus, closing down Hazardville Memorial has the added benefit of saving taxpayer money. Hazardville Memorial has the unenviable recognition as needing the most work done besides Crandall to stay operational. That's operational, not any advancements in it over the next decade. Yes, we'll need to make the repairs to the school to keep it operational, but by building the replacement first, we can minimize that cost. Our current plan also opens new possibilities for revenue. By moving the Eagle Academy to the current Enfield Street school location, we'll be able to accommodate more Enfield resident students who qualify for that program. Currently, when the Eagle Academy is full, excess students are bused to out-of-town programs. Enfield is responsible for providing transportation, which costs money, as well as the tuition, as John discussed. Not only will Enfield save that money, but we'll also have room for out-of-town students to come to our Eagle Academy, which brings in more revenue. As the committee toured Stowe in the spring, it was obvious that more room was needed. The expansion of our pre-K program is way overdue. The administrators of Stowe do a fantastic job fitting in as much as they do. But the time is coming when the state will mandate universal pre-K. Let's get ahead of that wave. We'll be able to accomplish that very goal by moving the Stowe Early Learning Center to the newly renovated Parkman building, and eventually the Enfield Child Development Center to the renovated Eli Whitney campus. The renovations of JFK and Enfield High have been, and still are, two shining examples of what this town can achieve when we think about the future and work together as one community. Parents saw what was available in their town and pulled their children back from magnet schools and re-enrolled them in our schools. But why stop at the middle and high schools? Let's continue to phase 3 and make our elementary schools just as fantastic for our children. My children won't have the opportunity to attend these new elementary schools, but they have and will attend the new JFK and Enfield High. I look forward to my grandchildren attending these state-of-the-art schools. Not that I have any yet, but someday. No pressure. I look forward to my children bragging to their out-of-town friends from the Enfield school system about the Enfield school system. After all, one of the most important questions prospective homebuyers ask is, how are the schools? Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Our next presenter. Also, I heard you were, Ken, did you have a question about his address? These are presenters.
There's a lot of questions, I believe.
No, but we weren't done with the presentation.
You were asking for
We
their
had presenters
addresses,
that were,
Oh, no,
we
when
had,
they come up, they should, just their name and address for the record.
but they're not audience members.
They're not
part of
audience
the
members, they're
committee.
presenters.
They presented their applications, and they're all Enfield residents and staff.
Yes.
Yes.
So what's the harm in their, that's, I mean, standard procedure when we,
We also need your blood type, driver's license number.
No, this is part of the presentation, though. They're not asking questions like public comments. What's that? What was?
They're committee members. We did.
That's what we said.
Thank you, Ms. Steery.
I'm Shannon Sterry, and I'm going to talk about some of the benefits for our youngest learners, which have been mentioned, so I'm piggybacking off of some. With this plan, the Board of Ed programs at STO, which is Head Start Integrated in STEAM, will be able to expand, as well as the Town Child Care Center, ECDC. Infant toddler care is a very high need, and this will allow expansion for this age group. When universal pre-K is mandated, the space will already be available, so we'll be ahead of the game. Additional and affordable pre-K seats will allow families to enter the workforce. Having pre-K available with more seats will be accessible and equitable, and it supports community and social cohesion. Another benefit is the regionalization. The school buildings have easy access to the main roads in town. The Eagle Academy and ETLA are next to the high school, which would allow credit access, and tuition from out-of-town students will generate income for Enfield. Next.
Thank you. Our next presenter.
Hi, everybody. My name is Vicki McLeod. Good evening, everyone, and thank you again for having me here tonight. Today, we wanted to go over the benefits to both families and students in regard to changing the current K-2 and 3 to 5 school models. After hearing the input from the architects through their analysis of the schools that would best be suited to bring the town into a K-5 model, again, it was decided that we wanted to go to an alternative route, which meant by using 2 out of the 3 suggested schools and adding a new school for the Central District. Committee members felt the students would benefit to bring the current model we follow in town and back to a K-5. We learned since the change that the students going from 2nd grade into 3rd grade struggled with the transition into another school. Familiarity was no longer. Our students had to learn a new school when they were just getting comfortable with the last. By making these changes, we would expect that the town would be able to bring before and after school care and more in-house services back to the current prospective schools the students would attend. We also felt that this would reduce the transition times in just getting these students to and from school, but also the start times from K-5 would now be the same. As for parents of the prospective students that would be attending these schools, we also felt that we would be able to provide more engagement amongst families and students. We no longer would have to choose which PTO group to attend, which open house we wanted to go to. Assemblies would be in one building. We are trying to bring a positive environment to our children of the community because now is the most crucial time for these children. We want our children to feel good coming to school. We would be able to provide more consistency across these 3 schools than the 6 that we have, along with Eagle Academy and the early child care. The students would have more space to learn. We'd be providing these students a better environment, but most important, by moving this direction, we would not have to redistrict the town, and our children would not have to be interrupted during these changes. These students don't need distractions, but what they do need is something to be done within the schools, and we all felt that this would be the best decision to move forward with. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Were there any other parent presentations from the School Modernization Committee group? I just wanted to mention an email that I got from some of the PTOs. They said some similar things. I won't repeat, but the increased staff and family engagement over 6 years, caregivers more likely to join and help with our events. By the time families get to know the school and feel comfortable currently, they're moving on to the next school at the current K-2 model. And I think a lot of these also benefit our staff, too. And I know that our staff doesn't want to say, you know, what could make our jobs easier, because I don't think personally that they want to share that, because it's difficult for them to be like, oh, this would help us. But, you know, anything that we did to help our staff helps them with their day and helps them educate our children. So that's all I wanted to add. Sorry.
Mr. Day, can I invite you back up because there's going to be a lot more questions that we'll want you to answer. Mr. Hamry?
Thank you, Chair. And this, I don't know if this is a fair question. I'm going to lead up to, but I'm going to try anyway. I was just considering the comments thus far and the presentation, which, by the way, yes, it was an amazing presentation. Thompsonville doesn't have a walking school anymore, and it's unfortunate. One of the things that has impacted the families of the the district's schools over the years since the reorganization is the busing and all those challenges of going to two different schools and all of that. What I'm kind of lost in thought about is the way the structure is, as proposed, going to affect the busing versus walking structure. And I know this is far too early in the process to consider that, but in my experience, the student that can walk to school, maybe bike ride to school, has a better experience at school. They arrive to school more alert because they've got the brisk air, the blood pumping, oxygen in the lungs, that kind of thing, versus the student that has to stand at a bus stop waiting for the bus with everybody else in whatever kind of inclement weather. So my concerns in this thought process that I'm going through right now is just whether or not we've got a sense of where that walker versus busser line would fall through these proposed locations, and the comment that it's unfortunate that Thompsonville continues to have a lack of neighborhood schools since Alcorn had been closed. So that's all. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Sakala?
Do you want me to?
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Not bad for a shop teacher, huh? Just to address the bus, we don't know at this point because, like I said, a lot of this is a recommendation coming to you guys. We can only go so far with this stuff. And again, it wasn't even us. It was a committee that ultimately presented it. The bus situation is interesting because, as John mentioned, some people may not be aware, but our current busing structure in the community we have a 4-tier bus system right now. It's pretty relevant because any of you who have students or family members who participate in athletics or who are planning on going to the football game Friday night, it's now moved till 6:30 because other communities are having busing crises right now. Part of that is self-inflicted based on the structure. So although we don't know where the boundaries will be in walkers versus riders, what we do know is under the current structure of a 4-tiered bus system, it creates the greater need for buses, a greater need for drivers, a greater logistical nightmare to get everybody where they need to go. And I think John was being polite when he talked about programs being in certain buildings. Those programs, we have to transport those kids outside of the normal 4-tier busing structure. So if we continue on this path, that is a real logistical issue that we have to try to tackle. Consolidating is just another advantage under this proposed plan, which John's become the face of, but it wasn't his. Would be more advantageous for how we actually operate the districts, including transportation. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, it creates a follow-up question, actually.
I didn't mean to do that.
I know.
I just knew he was going to try to answer, and he looked at me for the first time. This is the best meeting I've ever been to. He didn't look at me for like an hour and a half.
Does this, I want to be optimistic as possible. And again, I like that we have that rejoining of the K to 5 model. But I want to be optimistic and think that this will alleviate some of the bus issues, that it will create a simpler morning routine and an afternoon routine for the families that are going to be impacted, regardless of which school they're going to. So I just want to highlight that there is an impact nonetheless that families will have to adjust to, just like they've done in the past.
There is a potential, again, under a 4-tier structure like we are now with the constraints we have, we're pretty limited as to what we can do because legally we have to provide transportation. If we have more resources available to us because the structure has changed, that creates an opportunity for whether it be this board, a future board, future me, whoever, to reallocate that, free up those resources to have a better impact for families in the community, which may be expanding bus services for kids that we ordinarily wouldn't, but that's all done through board policy. There is potential to increase access for transportation for families beyond what we're capable of doing now because of the constraints we have due to the system that we're under.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Deputy Mayor Sakala?
Thank you. I actually don't have any questions. I apologize for being late. I co-chair the Safe Grad Committee, so that's where I was prior. I've actually had the opportunity to see this presentation twice before tonight as well, because I've been to the School Modernization Committee meetings. We saw it in leadership. Thank you very much for this and the 2 times prior that I've seen it. Thank you very much to the committee. It's been actually pretty amazing to sit in these committee meetings and watch the ideas percolate and watch them feed off of each other. And these teachers and these parents and these residents all come together for this common goal, and it is to make this town and this education system a little better. And I think that's pretty amazing. I've been able to ask my questions in the previous presentation, so I don't really have any additional questions tonight. But just to hit a couple of points, I do think it's going to reduce busing. This is going to kind of close the circle on this comprehensive plan on our school buildings, right? So we've started with the high school, now JFK, and we can close this loop that we started 10 or 12 years ago and make our littles kids their schools, you know, as better, even better probably than Enfield High and JFK. So I'm really excited for that. You did make a couple of great points for people to understand and keep in mind. Site acquisition is not reimbursable. We own the property at Mark Twain, which is honestly a benefit. And having a swing space, I think, for the little kids is extremely important. Having kids who lived through the construction at Enfield High and JFK, kids that age will deal with it. The littles, they're just going to want to hang out outside, see the truck, and think it's, you know, Bob the Builder in real life. So I do think having a swing space is incredibly important. And I do think that, and I think our superintendent has said this several times before, that having these new schools, you're going to see an influx of people come back to the district. Those students who may have gone to a magnet or a Creek school or something come back to the district. So we absolutely should plan for more classrooms than the 102, because I think we'll get a bump. So I'm all in. I'm all in favor. I think the recommendations from the committee, and John, thank you again. I think that we all should really take that into account because they've done a hell of a lot of work on this.
Thank you. Councilor Nelson?
A couple things. The first thing I would ask is, before you even spend a cent on the land in the industrial park, we need to find out how the town acquired that land. Is it open space? Was it donated to the town? Does it have to remain open space? I'd hate to get too far into it with, you know, soil scientists and engineers to find out we can't build on the property. And that may explain why they're saying the industrial park's full, besides the wetlands. Next, I support K-5 100%. I support the new schools 100%. But, you know, certain things were said in other meetings that I think we need to get out there now so it's not sticker shock. You had said we didn't discuss a final number. We don't have an exact final number, but we do have a rough number. And that rough number is a sticker shock to people, but we're only paying 30 cents on the dollar for it, which is still less money than what it costs us to fix our current schools. And the rough number is going to be approximately $180 million. Now,
I do need to stop you there. That number didn't take into account the ineligibles, so the number is going to be significantly higher. I didn't want to put that out because it is not final.
Right. So even at $180 million, people are like, that's insane. So at $180 million, the taxpayer in Enfield is responsible for approximately $62 million of it. So we have a lot of bonding projects on the books right now. What is it going to take for us as the council to fund a $62 million referendum. I would love to sit up here also and say, this is a no-brainer, but we're the ones who got to write the check. So it is a big brainer that we need to figure out where to come up with this money so we don't break the Enfield taxpayers. Again, I support the project, but it's not as easy as just, we want 3 brand new schools, we're going to bring back K-5, and it's going to be less busing. It's not going to be less busing, okay? Parkman is surrounded on all 4 sides by neighborhoods. Stowe is not. The whole back of Stowe is open. Crandall's surrounded on all 4 sides. Whitney's not. The industrial park's not. Every student that goes to Parkman or Crandall right now is going to have to be bused. So to say we're reducing busing, I think we're misleading people. And I want this to pass next year. And I don't want to mislead anybody. So I really like a study with the new location of busing, because what we spent money on already with this consulting firm has no idea that we're talking about putting a school in the industrial park. To me, I think it was a waste of money, because now we're doing something they had no idea about. And they should know. And the residents and the parents should know what this is going to do for busing their children. And the $62 million that the council has to put up, that's a big discussion we have to have. As far as the air conditioning in the schools that we are tentatively closing, the deadline's December 30th, as you said. You need a check from the town of Enfield for $5.2 million, a commitment of that money, and you need it now. Well, our charter says $880,000 or $830,000 is the most we can spend a year without going to referendum. And I don't want to hear there's ways around it. There's a reason why the charter says that, and that's to give the people of Enfield the choice, like every council has done before, by letting the voters decide on these large projects. We're not putting money on a credit card like certain council members say. We're letting the voters decide what we want to do. And a $20 million HVAC project for our schools is not a bad thing, but it needs to go to referendum so they can commit the $5.2 million and everybody's above board.
Yep. Taking your.
I was going to step in and actually ask for Ms. Zappo. I think this is more of a question that should be directed at you.
Well, we can discuss that at council, because we're going to adjourn and go into council. So I'll hit more of that.
No,
'cause
that's
I don't
fine,
wanna
but I
take-
just think it would be helpful to have an explanation now, since you just put it out there.
So I can, while she's coming up, I can mention that we do have an inquiry in with the Department of School Grants and Construction at DAS. We actually reached out to them to see if they will, if we come up with a commitment from the town with a referendum, with a potential referendum after the application date, if they will consider that. So essentially, the town is saying we're committing these X amount of dollars, and we plan to bring the additional funds, because it's a reimbursement grant, to referendum for bonding. So we brought that question to them. They did not immediately knock that down, and they're getting back to us to see if that does still meet the requirements of the grant. So we took your concern, and we brought it forward to DAS, and they are weighing that right now.
That's great news. I appreciate that. And I just want to say my last question.
Just while he's still on that, I also, after our last discussion, had a discussion with the finance director, who is also in the process of exploring what the town council's options would be, and it becomes a risk or reward. Do we want to apply for a grant or not? It's a short time frame, as we discussed. That was imposed on us. Like, we didn't create. It was 10 days ago we got the message. It's due December 30th. The finance director had given us some indication that there would be possibilities if the council were so to authorize us to do that. That would meet the needs and the requirements of the charter and the council. So there has been some diligence to that. We don't have all the answers at the moment, but we did take that under advisement from our last conversation.
Does that answer your question then for now, as far as what John gave you? You're good with that?
Because we discussed this
Right,
the other night,
yes.
and
followed up
beautiful,
immediately after.
and I appreciate it.
Okay,
It's-
so then the next steps will be during your portion of the meeting, like you said.
Or we get the answers when they get them
Right.
from the state.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
And my last
Yep,
question.
Go on.
Oh, I thought you said, hold on. My last question is, again, I support this project and I want it to pass. And one of your committee members came up and talked about uses of the schools that we're not going to be reusing. I agree, Hazardville Memorial, it could be a nice park. That's about the most we're going to do with the building. But to say that, Mark Twain, the doors are, overfull, people are on a waiting list to get in there. There's no money in renovating the schools. Look at Nathan Hale. The school's just sitting there and it's a waste. Look at the school on Brainerd Road, right almost across the street from Crandall. It's been sitting for 40 years empty. And how do I tell the residents, oh, we got a great plan for these schools that are going to get closed? We need to address better than, well, we can come up with an idea, because we haven't, and we need to. And I think we could do a great job selling it. I'd like to get this done sooner than later so we can spend more time answering questions that are going to come at us. That's all I have. Thank you, Tina.
Mr. Ungary and Ms. Pisner, I'll come to you after Mayor Crissati. Mayor Crissati?
Well, first of all, John, thank you for getting all this information. Thank you for answering Councilor Nelson's question in regard to the financing, since we had that long meeting the other night. So waiting to hear that information, I think, is going to be very vital to this. Just piggybacking a little on Crandall and Memorial. I think everybody realizes that Memorial, see you later, get rid of the building and we can create it with recreational, expanding, whether it's fields or whatever, open space, however we do that. In regards to Crandall, these are, something that we're going to be talking about in regard to, all right, are we all in on this particular school modernization program? I myself, yes. So, but we are looking for the pre-referendum committee. Can you just re-emphasize to everybody, by having this pre-referendum committee, that we will be getting a reimbursement with the work that this committee does in regard to the project? Could you just reiterate that to everyone?
Sure. So as part of the pre-referendum work, you're generally working on a more comprehensive design for the building. You're getting into more of the fine details, the actual system designs, and generally a fairly comprehensive cost estimate that includes your site, all systems, or so on. We generally, from a feasibility study, get rough estimates, kind of rules of thumb to estimate the buildings. Some of that design, which could be picked up in the final design, is potentially reimbursable. It depends a lot on how contracts are awarded and so on. So there's potential for reimbursement for some of the work that's done as part of the pre-referendum committee. Is it always all reimbursable? No, there's ineligibles, but there is a process for applying that. You're also doing, like I mentioned, design work that could be used or applied towards your school, which reduces future fees for the project.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted everybody to know that, because that's really, moving forward, that's going to be our next step in terms of, moving forward with a resolution, hopefully later, for the pre-referendum committee, for them to get going with the next phase of what you have recommended here. What I also really like about this particular program is the regionalization and the revenue that is going to be generated based on this particular project over a 10-year period. This is, something that, that there's going to be a lot of work, there's a lot of changes that are going to be made, but in terms of Eagle Academy and for the alternative ed program,
I could see that really expanding out on this particular modernization program. Studies are now showing that renovated and new facilities create a different atmosphere for students. This is what we're trying to, and I think everybody's in agreement, that this is what we're trying to create here in the town of Enfield, which would then also have that opportunity for families to move into this town, knowing that we're having this particular phase coming in next. There's no surprises when you go into a new building. We could all sit in here and say, how many times have you sat in a classroom where you were freezing? Never mind at the council chambers, but sitting in a classroom where you're freezing, or it's hotter than heck because there's no air conditioning, or there's mold growing off the ceilings. When students and staff and everybody that works in these types of facilities feel comfortable working under these types of conditions, what happens? Everybody's much more productive. And that goes for students and their scores. So, moving forward with this, I like all of the different avenues that are in play here. I'm all in, even on the HVAC. We can move forward with that as long as we're all set with phasing. I know that you did mention we could do this in 3 phases.
We would do it in 3 projects for the indoor air quality. So we have to submit as part of the grant for consideration a long-term strategic plan. I might be back to present part of that. The Pre-K through 5 School Modernization Committee final report will be an addendum to that plan, and we'd submit that to the state. They'd be looking at the eventual and long-term use of the facility, and they may score some projects higher or lower based on its eventual use. So it's wise to split it between 3 projects because, for instance, the Whitney might be getting a reduced rate or might not be eligible because of its eventual use as ECDC. But if even so, it's worth trying and applying for it, because if we potentially get some reimbursement, that's just less funds that we have to pay. So it would be 3 projects in total. Each would be a separate project number and a separate application.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Like I said, I've heard I think this is number 4. Just keeps getting ingrained more and more. So thank you. Thank you,
Okay,
team.
so Counselor Santinella actually had his hand up, so I'm going to go to Counselor Santinella, Counselor Pisner, Mr. Ungary, and Counselor Mangini. And then we'll get Nick in there. Counselor Hopkins. Okay, so that's the order, so we know. And then after whoever else wants to jump in, that would be great. Counselor Santinella?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you very much to everybody who worked on the committee and for your presentations tonight. It seems as though, is it fair to say at this point, we have more questions than answers at this point?
I think for future studies needed, right? I think we need to work through the process for pre-referendum to get to that final dollar amount, make sure that our sites that we've selected are going to be appropriate for the schools. This is a recommendation kind of for next steps, not final action.
So that is my question. To get through step number 1 on recommendations, what is it that you are asking for now?
Yep.
And how much is it going to cost for us to get to a place where you would be in a position to answer questions about everything else that includes financing, site selection, busing, and so forth?
I think for this next phase coming up, it would be best to put it out as a formal bid, right? So we would solicit bids for the scope of work, which we would need to still define further for this project, but solicit bids, because if we follow the bid process for that, and when we get estimates from the design professionals, that will essentially, it's one of the criteria needed for potential reimbursement in the future. So I don't want to say a dollar amount. I don't have experience in estimating school construction or pre-referendum costs. I know for Enfield High and JFK, they had to do additional allocations because there were additional assessments and work needed. So I don't want to commit to a number now. I think by letting the bid process, and then we can see, and you can choose to adopt or appropriate bid, you'll know the exact amount, and it will probably be more accurate than us just saying a dollar amount and trying to find a bid that fits that.
So what you need immediately is to go out to bid to complete stage 1, adoption of the site selection and phasing for future study.
I believe a pre-referendum committee, that second one, I think if I put the recommendations in order, is to say, does this body approve, or do they anticipate or want further study of this proposal? And if so, authorizing a pre-ref building committee, and in that phase, they normally solicit a architectural and engineering design firm to work on their recommendation. So we, for Enfield High, had Enfield High and Fermi as sites, and then they went through a process of bidding for a design team for there, and then they helped us refine that to the eventual Enfield High selection. I'm looking for a similar process here, where you'd say, we would like to move forward with these potential sites, and then form a pre-ref building committee, appoint members for that, and then they can come back and, once we have a full scope, be able to put that out to bid, and then come back with the final number.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I just add to that pre-ref, just since we're on it, but you would be members of the town that would be on it, as well as members of the Enfield Public School staff. There would be liaisons between the town council and the Board of Ed, and then there would be an application process for that.
Yeah, I understand. I guess the question is, I think we're getting into a lot of detail level questions that seem to be pretty premature. Not that I'm dismissing people's questions, but I think we're just not in a position before this pre-referendum building committee to be able to answer with any degree of certainty anything. So the question is, are we amenable to this idea? Are we open to repurposing, reconstructing our elementary school system, and then doing further investigation? I mean, that, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but it seems like that's what you're asking us. And all the other issues will sort of flow from that question.
It is essentially, we're just trying to be more targeted in this phase. We've made the investment to evaluate the school facilities. Think we've now selected 3 sites. Further study, which gets us to that more finite dollar amount and a final recommendation.
Thank you.
Councilor Pisner?
Thank you. This is the second time I've seen it. Thank you very much. You can see that a lot of thought went into this. I mean, you've really covered all your bases, and I'm appreciative of that. My husband and I do drop-off for our 4-year-old at Stowe and then run the other one over to Hazardville. So quite honestly, retired grandparents can't do it really easily. I don't know how parents do it. My hat goes off. My kids got on a bus, and I said bye-bye. K through 5, I'm 150% behind it. I mean, I said it before, and I'll say it again. It is the way it goes, and I stand behind that. I do have the same concern as Councilor Nelson with the Mark Twain building. As I sat on wetlands for several years, I think there's a reason why nothing has been built on that land. So I guess my question would be, if that site comes up as not a good site, where do you think you would move after doing this? Like, in your head, you must have something in your head saying, oh, okay, maybe we could do this one.
Yep, there are 2 adjoining lots to that are also owned by the town. One is Memorial Park, which is those sports fields that you see there, Veterans Memorial. There's also a lot to the north, which backs up along those houses along the road. If the site itself, there's possibilities, but again, that's for someone else other than me to say. There is additional land there, additional sites beyond that, we haven't identified.
Okay, fair enough. My other question was what Councilor Santinella asked was about what you'd be looking for funding now for the pre-referendum. Obviously, you're saying that's going to go out to bid. getting into the air conditioning, we're going to have a little bit more discussion with the town council on that. It's a big number. And we have to remember that there were 2 referendums that were passed in 2021, and neither of them have come to fruition. And there's a lot of residents asking why the safety complexes and why the roofs. So it's a big consideration that we're hearing that we passed 2 referendums. And that was 2 years ago. So we're talking about another referendum for next year when we haven't even given the residents what they said yes to 2 years ago. So that's a little bit of a discussion as well. But I am behind it. This is one of those moments where I wish we had a magic wand, because we do need this. So, thank you.
Mr. Ongire?
Mr. Daigle, thank you for your fine presentation. Well done. And to the members of the Modernization Committee who spoke here, and to all the members of the Modernization Committee who helped in putting this together. As everyone else I've heard of, I myself fully support the modernization plan. In its concept anyway of modernizing our schools. But there's one thing that concerns me here when I look at the site selection, and it kind of stands out to me. Currently, Prudence Crandall, the Crandall School is centrally located to major neighborhoods, okay? Those that are south of Brainerd Road, those that go from Brainerd Road north all the way to the state line. That location for Crandall is really kind of premium for servicing the educational needs of those students in that locality. Now you're going to take that school and you're going to essentially move it even further south up onto Brainerd Road, Elm Street, which is it may represent additional hardship for those neighborhoods, certainly well north of Crandall, where it exists today, to get all the way down to Elm Street for their young kids to go to elementary school. So. Has any consideration, and I think Councilor Nelson maybe alluded to it a little bit, but to any properties that are near Crandall that could be utilized for that, building a school in that type of central location that serves, many families in that particular high dense family area. And he mentioned, by the way, that property that's just up the street from Crandall, which was the old Noah Webster School. I happen to know that because, as yourself, I grew up in this town, and I spent my elementary years in that school, and traveled from the state line to there every day. And I can't imagine what it would be like to go from there all the way down to Elm Street every day for all of your elementary years. And then the additional busing that you'd have to do and have for all of those kids in those neighborhoods, even north and south, to get down to Elm Street. So I'm just asking the question, has consideration been given to better meeting those needs of those families in those areas?
There was a couple considerations with that. We did look at pretty much every available lot when we were starting the process, so in town, if things that were for sale or not. Some of the lots were eventually sold, but they often had a considerable cost. The school that you mentioned, Webster, is actually below the minimum size we would need.
Need 10 acres?
It would actually need to be 10 acres plus 1 acre per 100 students. So if that's an 825 student zone, we need approximately 18 acres on that site. So Crandall itself is below that kind of minimum acreage for a new school. Additionally, if we put a K-5 school in the Crandall site where it is now, we'll be essentially doubling the busing. So our site selection was along main roads where we weren't going to back up and block. Essentially, if you come in where Crandall is now, you could imagine buses backing all the way up down Brainerd Road. So that's a potential concern. The Crandall site is a little bit too small. for a school as well. So that was why it wasn't considered for a potential reuse site.
And actually, just to add to that, you raise a good point, Mr. Ungar, the highly dense area with families in the Bruins Crandall area. But in actuality, those families who live in that area currently send their kids to Henry Barnard School now, which is where the proposed site would be. If families have children in that area, in the Crandall area, and they're grades K to 2, they actually currently go to Henry Barnard now anyway, and that would be the same zone that this school would be proposed in. So there really would be no impact for those areas because they currently have to send those kids there anyway. And there was a question about busing, but I'll wait for Councilor Nelson to come back because he raised another good point. I just want to make sure I clarify when I answered Mr. Hamry's question.
So
Are you all set, Mr. Ungar?
I am. I could address that, but having the new schools gives opportunities to improve things, and clearly, it's a long way to go to school. All right, from there to Barnard, and if we're going to be building some new schools and we're going to be repurposing schools, we could look for opportunities to try to improve and make more convenient for our families, our Enfield families. Thank you.
Councilor Pisner, you had something to add.
I just had one quick thought. So when my girls were in school, they were K through 6. And obviously we had, I think it was 7 or 8 elementary schools. Have you ever thought about just renovating what we have and going back to K through 5 and smaller, like going back to the neighborhood school? So
yeah, we estimated it costing significantly more.
it would. Because the number was what? 100, or I looked at, what did we write down? Like 13, what was the first number? I don't know, I'm just thinking out of the box here.
It would be roughly 100 million.
100 million, and that you wouldn't get as much reimbursement because you're not, okay. Well, again, I'm just thinking out of the box.
Councilor Mangini?
Thank you. John, I want to thank you for a wonderful presentation. I also want to thank town and school staff and the Modernization Committee. This is a tremendous effort, and I know it's going to produce wonderful outcome. What you said earlier, piecemeal, you hit the nail right on the head. The roofs, the boilers. I've been around a long time, and I recall years ago we had money set aside for roofs, for boilers. That money's gone. So we have no choice. We have to go forward, and we have to apply for grants, we have to do referendums, et cetera. So speaking of heat, I have the privilege of being in one of the schools a few days a week, and I work with some of the children on reading and writing. The fifth graders are working on Kid Governor. One of the main themes, surprisingly, in addition to let's have better cafeteria food, is it's hot in here. It's hot in here. How do we fix the heat? And it really resonates because these are, well, in addition to the staff, these are children that are trying to learn, and they're uncomfortable. And it's difficult to learn when you're uncomfortable, as it is for the teachers to try and deliver materials, as you know. So again, all of this comes together, and we really need to get from behind the 8 ball, and we need to go forward. So I most definitely will support the plan set forward, and in any way of being of assistance to make it happen, I'm there with you. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Councilor Hopkins, Councilor Ludwig, and then Councilor Ungary.
Thanks for the level of detail in your presentation and for coming so prepared. I think your committee's really done their homework. As to the air quality issue, I was curious if in that study there's any discussion about near-term climate change impact on air temperature and air humidity levels in these schools. I think New England is, generally speaking, well positioned for climate change, I mean, as well as any place could be, but I really worry there aren't a lot of buildings and homes and schools that have air conditioning, in that it's costly, but when you're dealing with, real learning detriments and even some safety problems in the hotter months, that's a concerning thing. I do also want to say we're in a state where we have to constantly fight with other towns to get tax revenue back for our projects. I think we need to really be flexible. If we can save millions of dollars in that we're getting that money from the state, I think we should act. I appreciate that you've taken some of those things under consideration now, so that we have even the possibility of competing for some of those HVAC grants. Thank you.
Councillor Ludwig?
Thank you. Again, great presentation. Curious, did the Director of Finance give an estimation of what the town can afford for debt?
I think that's going to be.
I'm going to address that.
Okay. Can you address that now? Sorry. It's important to ask so I know the.
So to answer your question directly, we do not have a set presentation for you. We've been going through the last 2 years of our audited financial statements, looking at our debt load, and we've had this conversation as a town council before in terms of some of these other projects and priorities that you have. So my recommendation tonight, after talking with the director, is that we can do this. There's a couple of things that he wants to look at in terms of peak years, 2027 being one of them in terms of our debt repayment schedule. But we had previously talked about having the auditors come to a council meeting. And I think as part of that, the debt capacity piece, today's dollars versus tomorrow's dollars, and the cost benefit analysis that needs to go into making this decision could be folded into that presentation as well, so that you could hear it all from the people who monitor our finances.
Yeah, because I need to know that before I approve this, because a few years ago, the reason why we couldn't do the elementary schools and the middle school at the same time, because we couldn't afford the debt, no matter how much state reimbursement we were getting. So just using some of the numbers, so $250 million, even at 71% reimbursement, that's $70 million to the Enfield taxpayers, which I'm pretty sure we can't afford. I need it in writing to know exactly how much we can afford before it affects our bond rating, because we've had many conversations about this. And that's how we presented JFK. We were up front before we went to the taxpayer, where we asked for, we all could support the project. Hey, look, we can afford at $70 million, 70% reimbursement, town was X. I need to understand that. That's not to you, because I know that's not your question. I'm saying, but I mean, at $250 million roughly, $70 million to the Enfield taxpayer. We don't know exactly how much we're on the hook for the police department. I understand some things are moving around with the roofs. So, but I mean, I need to know this, and I'm sure most taxpayers. I don't disagree with the project at all, but it's hard to give it's hard for me, again, because I look at dollars and cents, and to say, look, I support something when I don't know if I actually can afford it. And so I don't disagree with the concept, but if we can't afford $70 million as part of that reimbursement, I don't want to waste anyone's time. What can we afford? So if it's only $20 million, and then 70% reimbursement is $150 million, whatever it may be, then that's what we need to focus on. So I guess it's sort of, I don't like giving agreement to concept, and I find out afterwards I can't afford it.
I do think that there are some natural stops built in there. So right now, we don't have an answer for you because we're not sure. Our original and initial looks at this are showing that we can manage that capacity. But the other piece that's really important here is that there's other ancillary issues that come into play. So the entire picture, which we need to look at when we get more into the detail on the debt and or the cost of the projects, is revenue potential, which has been talked about tonight. We have revenue generating programs.
Doesn't affect our
Number
debt,
one.
though.
Number two, we have reuse. So there's opportunities for reuse, which could potentially have cost avoidance, cost effective pieces to it. The regional hub, again, revenue generation. The cost of real estate, the reduced footprint on some of our operating expenses. So again, to that point, there's a high demand at the annex. We know that we could do better at ECDC if we had more space. All of these things are the complete overall financial picture that needs to be discussed by the town council. The actual debt capacity question, if this were to receive a positive response tonight, the finance director would have the answers, hopefully initial answers based on some of the projections for Tuesday's meeting. He will absolutely be able to speak to the efficacy of going for the HVAC grant and how we would balance that.
For me, I need to see that first if I can wait till and I also need to understand, the taxpayers need to understand, if we lose a bond rating 1 point, That's significant amount of interest to our debt. These are all the things people need to understand before you support something, in my opinion. So I'm sorry, that's fine, I mean, but I disagree. So, first of all, great presentation. Question on the Eagle Academy. You said there's 27 students there currently? Can we get a rough estimate of what that is for revenue now and what we saved by not, if they were Enfield kids and they're not going to another district, that was part of what we were doing, is we were actually saving some of that money. Can we get, again, to talk about revenue generating would be, if you have some of those numbers, it'd be great.
So based on a student's need, the cost to outplace a student could be somewhere between $70,000 and $150,000 per student.
Yep.
So if you think that if you have, 26 students, you can figure out the range in there.
Can we get the actual numbers?
I don't have the actual numbers for you. I'm just saying rough estimate.
Yeah, you could get it for me, it'd be great. Now, I understand how it works, because I was for doing what we did in the Eagle Academy, was on the council,
So
but we've never
at that
gotten the
point,
actual
just
numbers.
a reminder, we needed
Yeah.
about 6 to 8 students to
Right.
break even, and we surpassed that the first year.
It's great news. I'm all for the program. I just want to see the actual finances of it, if you don't mind.
I don't have access to that.
Yeah, I don't have it on me, but certainly we can.
If you already gave this to us, can we get a copy of the demographic study?
Demographic study is
The one that
still
you're mentioning
in
in-
draft.
It's a draft, okay.
So I don't want to put out any draft documents because I only want to put the final, because we do want firms to work with us in the future.
No.
Putting out draft work would
Yeah,
potentially.
I kind of need that, if you don't mind, when it's final. I just request to you.
Will all be posted to the Pre-K through School Modernization Committee website when we have all final
Did
versions,
you-
and then we can send links to the town
Did you
manager.
take a look at the prior study that was done around 2015? Just curious how the estimates were there. Did you take a look at that as you know?
We did. We actually provided the prior estimates for this demographic
So
study. So they
were
had a
they
comparison.
projected, or were they accurate? I mean, did you see? I mean, because again, studies can be certainly
So
manipulated.
the Enfield High number was actually predicted lower. We have more students
Yeah.
than
That's why I was curious,
predicted
yeah.
for Enfield High.
What about K through?
Our K through 5 is really accurate in the short term, and then it drops off after
Got it.
you hit 3
Yeah.
to 5 years. The last study that was done is nearly spot on with our current enrollment. It's within, I think, 50, which is pretty impressive in the range. So the projections have been good. There might be changes in the demographic study in a pre-referendum because we've changed the site location.
Right.
That may also change that. So it's not unlikely that there would be further demographic study because it was beyond the original scope. Also, if the town approves additional housing, so let's say if a big housing project or development comes in, that's going to impact that.
Yeah, I get it.
So again, there's no hard answers tonight. It's what direction would we like to go for future study? And no one has a commitment. There's no referendum. You'd be getting information as the process continued. A decision to go to referendum would be made in August.
Right.
That includes the final number. That includes the bonded amount, the cost share to the town. That includes the proposals, all of the locations.
Right.
And before that ever goes out, the pre-ref building committee makes a recommendation back to this body, who makes the ultimate decision.
Right, before you even went to bid, though, you kind of got to know what the scope of what we can afford before you actually go for bid.
We can't make the scope for
I'm
the
just saying, but if we
pre-referendum
can only,
without knowing the
but if we
sites.
can only
so.
afford 20 million, 30 million, and you're going out for 250 million, well, there's a little bit of a disconnect there. That's all I'm saying. I understand how it works, and I get it. And I appreciate you being honest about this was different than what was presented earlier when this was, the K to 5 is for for neighborhood schools, which I'm for. But I'm trying to remember back when we went from neighborhood schools to K to 2 to, when we switched it up. One of the issues I remember at the time, and please correct me if I'm wrong, was enrollment in certain schools, and we were endangered by state. We talk about state mandates and everything else. There's issues with certain families that lived in certain areas, and so we had to kind of go to that model. So if I recall, there was issues because we had certain. Maybe some schools had more kids, some schools didn't. Do you see that as an issue? Because again, in the 3 buildings, are they going to be multi-level buildings you foresee? Just curious, because I have to admit, I'm not a big fan of rebuilding into the industrial park. It's not a neighborhood. If we're going to do this, I'd like to stay in the neighborhood somehow. So I'm just saying, is it multi-level you're thinking of, or what's the design if you had a perfect design?
So design for efficiency, for
For
best
education
return
purposes,
on your
yeah.
investment and education, I think multi-floor buildings
So
make the
multi-floor.
most sense. you have a lower
Yeah.
overall envelope for your building,
Yeah.
right, which means you have less area that you're.
So you'd split the floors by grades in theory?
Correct.
Got it,
Yeah.
okay.
That makes the most sense for elementary. We've seen some excellent models on tours we've been through of multi-floor buildings and really clever ways to manage flow. But yes, you'd have your lowest grade levels, so kindergarten's on your first floor. And then if you have any special program classrooms with close access to the main entrance, if parents, visitors, additional student support services need to come in, that would all be located first floor, and then grade levels going up. 2 or 3 floors would be determined in a pre-referendum phase. That's determined by your site access, buildable area. 3 floors, I don't know if you think we're going back real traditional, but an Alcorn-style building is more efficient. There's a reason they used to build schools that way.
So when you mean more efficient, explain that.
Sure. The more surface area you have on a building, the more energy lost. Also, you can have increased glazing windows. Windows are expensive. You're losing heat out of them. Multi-floor buildings make sense for school security. You have a smaller perimeter. Circulation is also important, so you can have students moving through the building. If they're moving to specials, you can keep certain grade levels on a certain floor, so you're not having them move through a larger footprint building. So it's shorter transition time if they're moving to classes. As you go up, you have less physical distance. If you have an existing building like Henry Barnard and you added an additional wing off to the front, you could imagine it's a long trek for the kids to go to the library. That's minutes you've lost. So it's efficiency in educational minutes, it's efficiency in building materials and construction, it's efficiency in energy use going forward. So it does make sense to go up for the schools. We're looking at it as the best return on your dollar and the best outcome for our students within them.
That's the key, right? What you last said was, I appreciate you saying that, because I think that's important, and it's affordability in that last sentence you said, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, and just to continue your point, Counselor Ludwig, I think it's important for everyone here to understand that it will cost the taxpayers $100 million minimum to do nothing.
Well, again,
and simply
that was moderate work. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but moderate work doesn't mean it has to be good. Okay.
So it's repairs, it's security, it's abatement. You cannot add on and you cannot modernize buildings that are 60 years old. So there's no ability to go up. You're not going to balance something on a foundation like that. So the 101-ish minimum $1 million is a real number in terms of what we've sketched out in terms of the project list that we look at every year in the capital improvements, safety and abatement, which are priorities, and then the HVAC. That gets us all the way up to $101 million sketched out on a sticky note. And I know that there's more costs. So the question becomes $100 million to tread water, or do we looking at our debt structure and what can happen? And I don't think it's $250 million. I'm not sure where that number came from, but I don't want to exaggerate what is potentially a lesser number in order to have new facilities.
Again, moderate work doesn't mean it has to be done. I mean, so you're using $100 million. You're being very generous with that number. Look, I'm not going to argue with it.
I'm not being generous.
But my point is,
you can't
my point is,
continue
we
to
still
kick
have
the
to
can down the road.
be able to afford it. Okay, I mean, even if it's needed, we still have to afford it. And if it's people, the taxpayers need to know before they go vote for it, hey, it may throw off our bond rating, and if they know that and they still vote for it, then so be it. That's information taxpayers need to know.
But I also don't think that this is the kind of community that's going to put at risk children, staff, and teachers in buildings that, frankly, should have been renovated and remediated many years ago. And that's what I think about when I look at these numbers.
Counselor Ungary?
Okay. Thank you for that great presentation. I commend you and the whole Modernization Committee. I can tell a lot of work has gone into this and a lot of thought and preparation. So I appreciate all your hard work, thus our discussion here tonight. I just had 2 questions. You had mentioned, I do want to say that I totally support the K through 5. I think it's a great idea and I would love to see it. The buildings are well beyond their years, and I support that. You had mentioned that there would be 8 less classes and then a projected possible increase in attendance. So I'm wondering, does this affect our teachers' job security? How does that work with all the teachers? I wouldn't want to see
No,
anybody.
I don't think so. I only throw out that number because anyone who was interested could take the square footage and those enrollment numbers and go through the information in the Office of Grants and School Construction website and figure out the number. So I just wanted to put it out there. Through the pre-referendum, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, we'd have to make decisions on how we wanted to allocate space and if there is appetite for additional unfunded program space. There was a certain amount that was included in Enfield High and unreimbursed program space. There's more of a process that needs to happen in order to make sure we're utilizing the space effectively in the building to make sure that we're maximizing the number of classrooms that are available. We do anticipate that we would need more than that 102. I only just put that out there as a tool for estimating reimbursements.
Okay, thank you. My other question, you had mentioned about having a public hearing. Has there been any scheduling of when you're going to have that? Because I'd be really interested in what the public would have to say.
I think that the best time for that would be as part of a pre-K or a pre-referendum committee. In that, we would have more solid answers after some work with the design team. So they would say, here is a more formalized design. Here's renderings. If you remember for the JFK projects, they showed rough layouts, 3D models of it, and gave more accurate cost estimate of the building cost and a more formal presentation from the design team with feedback from the committee. We did it for Enfield High, we did it for JFK. We kind of envisioned the same process with this.
Okay, thank you.
Dr.
Kalnin? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Follow up because I know this is going to come up. I know you didn't ask me, but I know you mentioned, because I lived through it the last time I think you were here. One of the big concerns when we did the high school project was, are we going down to one school, we're going to lose staff? And the board and the council at that time made a commitment that that was not going to. I can go on record now saying, I don't have enough staff today. I don't anticipate if you guys bless this that I'm going to lose anybody to do this. As a matter of fact, it's going to better utilize the staff we currently have to better serve the needs of where our kids are. Because right now, we are stretched in. We talk about teachers in 6 different buildings, teachers that have to travel. We have to build time in for that to go across town. There is, Counselor, Board Member Unghire was correct. There is a large distance between some of our schools. Our teachers have to do that. So having more consolidated effort in 3 buildings lets our teachers have more time to do what they came here to do, and that's work with our kids. And that's never been part of our discussions about, well, yeah, we go down to 3, we can cut staff. So, sorry, you didn't ask me, but
Right,
that question
no.
came up
Yes.
10 years ago when we did this at the high school. Let's just get that out open now.
Right, thank you very much. I'm
Sorry,
encouraged to
Madam Chair.
hear that. Thank you.
Dr. Kalnin?
John, that's a terrific presentation. Thank you. Just a question about Parkman. So the plan is to move Stowe and ECD over to Parkman, and then eventually to move ECDC to Whitney, correct?
Correct.
Why is it possible to keep ECDC at Parkman? Ideally, it would be great to have early childhood services all located under one roof for purposes of continuity of care.
There is a certain benefit to having them together, which is why all the programs are moved there. We moved Head Start over, and we had the 2 programs together. I think what the issue is we're not able to serve as many students and families as we possibly could. And we do have, and it's not certain, but there is potential for universal pre-K to come to fruition. In that case, I think it's probably beneficial to us to have that additional capacity available there at Stowe for universal pre-K and be able to expand both programs. I know that right now there's 5 infant and toddler rooms in ECDC. I'm certain that there's demand for more rooms. So at least moving to Parkman, we have 4 additional classroom spaces over what's at Stowe in order to service as many students as we can now. And then if everything works out as planned 4 years later, we'd be able to transition students over to that Whitney site, and then both programs could expand further.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, we can, we'll wrap this up so we can move on to the town council portion of the meeting. One of the things I did want to address is for people watching, we talk about Eagle Academy. I want to explain what Eagle Academy is. Eagle Academy is a therapeutic day school that was created here in Enfield because we were sending our special ed kids, some which we did not have the resources to service, to other schools. And the cost of that was very expensive. And there was really no benefit of sending kids an hour on a bus ride and not being part of their community. So we moved into Eagle Academy. Unfortunately, the only building space we had for Eagle Academy was the old Head Start building, and they are completely maxed out there. So we are maxed at 27 kids, and the directors still have to turn kids away. Even more about Eagle Academy, they have to be bused to Alcorn in order to use the gym because there is no gym there. So I just kind of wanted to put it out there what Eagle Academy is and how growing that program would be beneficial to the town of Enfield. Again, we get calls a lot from Summers, Ellington, Windsor Locks, East Windsor. We are the size of the town that can offer resources that those towns cannot. So if those towns are going to use our services, they're going to be paying us what we would pay to have our students here. So it's important to know that this long-term plan captures regionalization in a very positive way. I want to address something too. A question was asked at this modernization committee meeting, why we weren't going to use Hale or why we wouldn't consider Hale. And so, since that's a hot topic, would you explain why we would not be able to use Hale as a site?
Yeah, we looked at Hale originally. Its current size of the site doesn't meet the minimum requirements for a consolidated school.
Okay. When we started this committee, the committee took tours of every single building here in Enfield that was being used as a school. And I think one of the things that we all agreed on is the condition of our schools. Hale was the worst, Memorial was the worst, Crandall was the second worst. But what's even more concerning is the space issues. We're having support services in offices. We're having closets. We're having support services that have screens up to divide. So if you have a kid in trauma, there's not a lot of privacy for that the teacher, the staff member, and that child. The services that are at Stowe are on the stage. These buildings are maxed out to capacity. So on top of them falling apart, we have no more space in our current buildings. I want to just talk about when the committee first presented, they said we would go back to the K-5 model, but they never said that we would be back to a neighborhood school model. They said they would be looking at sites and that they didn't once say that it was a neighborhood school. The other thing is, it's about choices, and we also need to understand the choices that got us here. Historical underfunding of our schools, and taking money from CIP projects to not have our schools repaired. And that's why we have to go to referendums. I mean, that's a fact. And every time a school needs to get fixed, we have to pass a referendum, and we do it in phases, and then we pay more money. I think that when we talk about our taxpayers, it's important to educate the taxpayers on how much it would cost to repair all of our buildings to keep them at status quo. Now, when we were on the JFK pre-ref committee, there was a little bit of contention there because there was a really ingrained battle between, are we using Fermi, or are we using Enfield High? That, we still talk about that, why we chose Enfield High over Fermi. When you have a former pre-ref committee, that pre-ref committee's job is to compile numbers and have those community conversations. So we were able to put up on a screen in the old Enfield High auditorium and say, this is how much Fermi's going to cost. This is how much Enfield High is going to cost. And then make our point as to why Enfield High was the better site. Now, I think that we are putting the cart before the horse because we want a lot of answers that are going to develop through the whole process. We'll get more answers. One of the things that Mrs. Ungeyer had spoken about was the reduction of staff potentially. The pre-ref committee met with teams of teachers from both Enfield High and Fermi, and they sat together and they talked about the changing in the programming that they can do. Can I just wait for you guys to stop? because I think we're making important points and everybody's like up and down and all around.
So I'm just trying to help out pass on order everybody and the audience.
I appreciate that. So you could have said, please stop. I want to help our audience members and I want to, attend to the dais, but everybody's up and around. And I sat quietly and listened to all of you and respected your time. So I'm expecting you to do that for me. Thank you. So let me know when you guys are finished.
Who else wants some water while I'm standing? Come on, raise your hand. Don't be shy. 1, 2, 3. Scott, anyone?
Completely disrespectful.
This wasn't your remark, too, by the way.
That's your opinion, but I was very respectful of everyone who spoke tonight and listened with my undivided attention.
I know, I'm not going to give you my blood type.
So I'm going to start all over.
A lot of waters. We don't get that on JV. We're not used to it.
Yeah, we don't get water
Wait
bottles.
staff on JV. You guys get fed and watered. Plants.
Okay, so we talked about Eagle Academy. Thank you for your time to explain the Hale footprint isn't enough acreage for us to go to Hale. I'm going to revisit again. When the K-5 committee presented, they never said it was going to be a neighborhood school. I never once heard them say that. They said they were revisiting the K-5 model, but they never once said anything about a neighborhood school. I'm going to also reiterate, we also need to understand the choices that got us here. Historical underfunding with CIP projects. We take money out of CIP to keep our taxes low, and then all of a sudden, we have all these building repairs that we need to do. We have water pouring in the windows at Hazardville Memorial. We have roofs leaking left and right. And what we do is we pull out a Band-Aid and we Band-Aid it. Then we go to referendum, and we don't have return. There is no long-term vision. This is what this is, a long-term vision. It's a proposal. I think we're putting the cart before the horse because a lot of the answers are going to come to fruition as the process starts. But this is a starting point. We all need a starting point in any project that we do. We're talking about the taxpayers. It's going to be that pre-ref. It's going to be the town council's job, and then it's going to come down to the pre-ref to hold community conversations, put up on a screen, this is what it's going to cost you to do X, Y, and Z. And this is what it's going to cost you to do A, B, and C. And educate them so that it's their choice. But you have to educate them and have plenty of community conversations. I think we had at least 3 during the Fermi and Enfield High pre-ref. I was on that committee because I was first elected. I was also, the reason why I'm sitting here is because the schools went K through 2 and 3 through 5, and I didn't want it. And it's proven to be unsuccessful. And it's not just the busing issues, the decimation of the PTOs, more importantly, it's what it's done to staff and what it's done to our students. We tried it for 10 years, it didn't work. There was one building that had gotten cited, and that's why these buildings were looked at, and that was Alcorn. And that's when the whole discussion started about going K through 2 or 3 through 5. But we did not need to go K through 2, 3 through 5. Many parents would have supported just staying K through 5 because 6th grade has proven to be more successful at JFK. And I agree with that. One of the things that Mr. Daig has suggested, and this is something that should have been happening a long time ago, that when we're going through this process, we create a building reuse committee so that we can actually identify how we want to reuse our buildings. Crandall, Hale, Memorial. We have so much time, and we have a committee that's recognizing how important open space is. Because the Board of Ed doesn't listen to open spaces, but we listen to your guys' meetings, and open space is important. But when we sit there and paint a picture that, you know, we're not being honest with the taxpayers, or we're not going to inform the taxpayers, I can't accept that. And moderate work is important work. There's urgent, there's high, there's moderate. And how can we just say to a bunch of students and teachers, it's moderate, you don't need it, we're good to go. There's a reason why the infrastructure in this town is the way it is.
Because we've been saying that.
So this is an opportunity to revisit the K through 5 model that was strongly supported by a committee of residents that are not elected officials, staff, some staff are both staff and parents, the residents, some of them that are on the committee, their kids aren't even going to benefit from. We have to start somewhere, and this is where we're starting. This is as far as we can go. So this is as far as we're using the committee. So we need the council to tell us where we can go with this. And they've done a lot of work, and they've done a lot of honest work. And I appreciate every single one of you. And I also want to say, if we're talking about reduction in staff, because I said this before, when we were on the pre-ref committee, there was committees formed at the time for the high school. Like the English department at both schools got together, the science department. They all got together and they said, with a combined high school, this is what we can offer the students. And since our schools have been combined, our culinary program has grown, our graphic arts program has grown, tech ed has grown. Everything those teachers said that would happen, happened. And I think it's an amazing time to be able to have teachers come and say, what can we do to improve our K-5 model? What can we do for these kids? What will make our jobs able to help bring up these test scores and be in a more productive environment? And to Mayor Crisati's point, your building does make a difference. The building you walk into every day does absolutely make a difference. So I appreciate every one of your perspectives. I'm happy you could make this meeting tonight. It's very important to me that rather than having split caucuses and somebody's only getting pieces of information, I think it was important that we all sat here and we saw the presentation. I know the town council has bigger decisions to make tonight, and you will be comfortable with however you're going to vote on that. But I want to say I appreciate your time for coming tonight. I appreciate my board members for also giving up our meeting time to discuss this. Unfortunately, we're under a time constraint because of the HVAC grant deadline. So again, thank you. Thank you to the School Modernization Committee. I really appreciate your time and effort. The next on the agenda, it says action, if any, regarding School Modernization Committee presentation. The board does not have to take any action. So we are going to head and skip that. So if you are a board member, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Calnan, seconded by Mr. Hamry? Okay. All in favor if you're a board member? Okay. We are adjourned. We're not done. We have to sit there.
Board of Ed is indefinitely, parents don't pay them. Are you guys gonna stay
Thank
up
you.
here?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want
perfect.
us to?
I would, yes.
You want us to go
so
home?
that way we,
No,
I
no,
wanna
no.
like, I wanna just go now.
No.
I just wanna do it now.
Can I run to the ladies' room?
Yes, hurry up.
So you're aware the council's meeting.
The council's meeting
I didn't mean to get up.
on this, yes.
It wasn't you.
Welcome to the Enfield Town Council special meeting. This is to discuss the School Modernization Committee presentation, take any action that might be necessary. The time is 9:36. I'm going to ask the town manager to take roll call, please.
Counselor Despard.
Here.
Counselor Finger.
Here.
Counselor Hopkins.
Here.
Counselor Ludwig.
Here.
Counselor Mangini.
Here.
Counselor Nelson.
Here.
Counselor Pisner.
Here.
Counselor Santinella.
Here.
Counselor Ungary.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sakala.
Here.
Mayor Crisati.
Here. Item number 2, discussion of the School Modernization Committee presentation and to take any action if necessary. We've heard the presentation. We've all made our comments in regard to it. In front of me, I do have a resolution establishing the School Modernization Pre-Referendum Committee. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
That's Councilor Despard and a second by Councilor Mangini. And the resolution is establishing the School Modernization Pre-Referendum Committee. Whereas it is the goal of the Enfield Town Council to provide the community with a modern, efficient, accessible, and suitably equipped public buildings, and whereas the Enfield Town Council and the Board of Ed have recognized the need to prioritize improvements and upgrades to the educational facilities, building systems, and recreational components at the elementary schools. And whereas among the changes sought is the elimination of the sister school K-235 model and revert back to the K-5 elementary schools and potentially repurposing other buildings within the inventory for better educational utilization. And whereas to finance and implement a recommended project requires a successful referendum vote by the electors of the town of Enfield, and whereas before a referendum may be considered and presented to the public, a number of tasks must be completed which can be facilitated through the appointment of a school modernization pre-referendum committee. Now therefore be resolved that the Enfield Town Council does hereby establish the School Modernization Pre-Referendum Committee to be comprised of the following members, all of whom shall be residents of Enfield, 1 school administrator, 2 school teachers, 4 electors, and 2 town employees. And where therefore be resolved that the Enfield Town Council, after consulting with the Enfield Board of Ed, shall make appointments of the above referenced committee members by way of separate resolutions. And further be it resolved that the Enfield Town Council and Board of Ed shall appoint 2 of its members to act as liaisons between their respective council and board and the School Modernization Pre-Referendum Committee. And further be it resolved that the School Modernization Pre-Referendum Committee's duties and responsibilities will be to work with the selected architectural and engineering firm during the design phase of preliminary plans and cost estimates, work with the town board staff and engage consultants to determine enrollment estimates, education specifications, space needs, and technology opportunities for the school facilities. Work with the architectural or engineering firm to prepare proposed scheduling and phasing of planning and construction. Provide timely updates to related committees, the Enfield Town Council and the Board of Ed administrators as necessary. Coordinate communication between the School Modernization Pre-Referendum Committee, the town manager, and the superintendent in order to keep them apprised of updates. Engage citizens, businesses, and students in Enfield regarding the proposed improvements to solicit input, record comments, and report findings back to the Enfield Town Council and the Enfield Board of Ed. Work with school staff, students, parents, and residents to identify priority goals and objectives for the schools along with the benefit of their ultimate accomplishment. And finally, 8, transmit a final report of its work to the town manager by July 12th, 2024. Further be it resolved, the School Modernization Pre-Referendum Committee shall terminate upon the date of its transmittal of the final report to the town manager or upon the town council's dissolution of the School Modernization Pre-Referendum Committee, whichever comes first.
So moved.
Councilor Mangini and Deputy Mayor Scala is second. Discussion. Councilor Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand it's election season. I get it. I would just hate for this project and the larger project of school modernization in Enfield to suffer because of it. I think we can probably all agree, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are real economic benefits to improving schools in town. You're attracting new families. You're growing the town where we are currently losing population. You're reinvigorating a place, and you have additional property value increase and businesses which come to town as a result of that. Now, I think it's the cost portion that objectively folks probably disagree on. I do believe that the committee has spent a lot of time thinking about the costs here. They have offered a number of pretty reasonable cost-saving measures, whether that's multi-story school, whether that's being able to maximize the amount of money reimbursed by the state. I trust them with that. I think it's fair to ask questions, and I think ultimately the purpose of this resolution is to get more information to be able to answer those questions. And maybe we disagree at the end on the cost issue, but I think they're doing their best to balance student outcome with costs. And even if you're a person in town who doesn't have children in the school system, there are still economic considerations. But at the end of the day, I strongly support moving forward to get those answers, because either way we're going to have costs, whether that's waiting until we have serious problems that have to be addressed in our old schools, or if we act now. I think I would like to know more about this. I think this committee does that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion on the resolution? Sensing none, we're going to have a roll call. And Ellen, roll call, please.
Counselor Despard.
4.
Counselor Finger.
4.
Counselor Hopkins.
4.
Counselor Ludwig.
Against.
Counselor Mangini.
4.
Counselor Nelson.
4.
Counselor Pisner. 4. Counselor Santinella. 4. Counselor Ungary.
4.
Deputy Mayor Sakala.
4.
Mayor Crisati.
4.
Resolution passes 10-1.
Okay, item number 3, to discuss the potential of applying for the fiscal year 24 HVAC indoor air quality grant program for public schools and to take any action as necessary. I thought during the discussion, I think everybody was pretty much open for applying for the grant, but I think that we were going to wait until our October 2nd meeting and get our information, our financial information together before we would have a final vote and a resolution.
Yes, Mayor, we were hoping to float the idea of this rapidly approaching deadline and this opportunity to you tonight in the context of everything that you've discussed with the school modernization piece. Indoor air quality is not part of what was looked at, so this is something that I would call an opportunity. There is the grant application aspect of this. So to be clear, we are committing to putting a finance package together that would meet the requirements that the state would accept based on the restrictions of our referendum. However, there is no commitment until we know whether that grant is going to come to Enfield. And at that point, we would be able to structure that in such a way so as to know what the total cost is versus what it would be from a referendum perspective. I think it's also really important as we look at this opportunity to understand what today's dollars mean in terms of our costs, grant opportunities, but what it would cost maybe 5 or 10 years from now. And those costs are going to grow exponentially, especially what we've seen in the building trades and the projects that we're doing right now.
Okay, thank you.
Motion to table it?
Well, you know, at this point in time, we have a motion to...
There's no motion. It was really just for all of you to become familiar with what we're looking to do. And if it's something that passes the litmus test of you wanting to pursue it, we will have an appropriate resolution showing the financial proposal that Mr. Wilcox is putting together for your agenda on Monday.
Okay, perfect. I am good with that. Councilor Pisner?
Just one quick question. So now that we're hopefully moving forward with the remodernization, the HVAC would not go into schools that we would be potentially closing, correct? So you'll give us a list of the schools that are going to be receiving this,
The ones that are targeted, and the superintendent can correct me, I believe we went over earlier, is Whitney,
Okay.
Enfield Street School, and Parkman, and there would be a separate building committee set up for this, separate from your school modernization pre-ref committee.
Okay, so Stowe would stay open, but we wouldn't do anything with that? Because isn't Stowe going to be a school?
the new South School.
Yeah, not under the HVAC grant.
Right, so we're not going to do HVAC in that because it's going to stay.
Right.
Correct.
I just want to connect the dots.
Yep.
Okay.
So,
Correct. Okay, that's
So-
all I wanted
Counselor
to.
Pizzer raised another good point, because the question may rise, how come you're only applying for 3 schools? You only get one bite at the apple. So in the event you apply for this HVAC grant for buildings that are going to be reused, and the council and the board and the community ultimately decide they like the original plan, then they're going to look for school construction dollars to upgrade other facilities. If we apply for and receive the grant funding for HVAC in, let's say, Henry Barnard is no longer eligible for state reimbursement for the larger project. So we have to be careful and targeted on what we would apply for.
Okay, so I apologize. I didn't get anything in writing. We just got a little snippet in an email. So I couldn't read anything and actually visually see it. So that's why I asked that question,
And
just
that's
to
why we're-
verify.
We're just introducing it tonight.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
okay, are there any other questions? So on October 2nd, we will have all the information and we will have a resolution and be ready to vote on the grant for the HVAC on Monday, October 2nd. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Councilor Despard and Councilor Finger, second. Meeting is all in favor, meeting adjourned, unanimous. Meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening.